Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle. Chapter 101. Get the top spot. The atmosphere slowly quieted down. Everyone was still immersed in the series of fierce battles, their minds still not calm. However, even though the fiercest battle had already ended, why did everyone feel a sense of disappointment in their hearts? In conclusion, many people had an answer in their hearts, and that was: his intentions were not over yet. Elder Yu praised, "It's hard to imagine that this is a battle for the Xiantian Realm City." Yes. At the side, Elder Yu's senior brother also nodded and said, "In the eyes of us old fellows, warriors in this stage of the Xiantian realm to the origin returning realm, their battles are just small fights. But today, Xiang Nan used a man and a saber to perform a hearty battle against us. It taught us that a battle between low-level martial artists can also be shocking. The battles between high-realm martial artists were either water-cut or sea-shattering, or even heaven and earth-shaking. However, everyone guessed today that the shock brought about by the battle of martial arts did not necessarily require a big scene. Looks like the results are out now." Many sect envoys exchanged glances with each other, believing that the battle was over and that Xiang Nan had won the final victory. However, the next scene caused everyone's hearts to rise again. There was another person. In the exam hall, there was another person carrying a sword, slowly walking towards Xiang Nan. Li Qingchuan. Everyone cried out in shock. How could he forget this person? However, Li Qingchuan of Mo Hai's team had never participated in the battle. He had always maintained his most complete strength. Especially Li Qingchuan, who was a late Xiantian 8th layer martial artist. At this moment, every step Li Qingchuan took towards Xiang Nan was affecting the hearts of thousands of spectators. Xiang Nan. Xiang Fei pulled out her spear and hurriedly ran towards Xiang Nan. She could not allow Xiang Nan to die under Li Qingchuan's sword in this final period. The current Xiang Nan didn't even have the strength to speak. Elder Yu's heart skipped a beat. Oh no, it's a blessing in disguise. Xiang Nan's saber slashed Kai Jianyun at the 9th level of the Xiantian realm, suppressing half-step Guiyuan Mahai and fighting Wang Jingyun at the 2nd level of the Guiyuan realm. Could it be that in the end, he would die at the hands of a Li Qingchuan at the 8th level of the Xiantian realm? Good fortune messes with people, really good fortune messes with people. It's broken. City Lord Hongzhen's heart was burning with anxiety as he said, "There is still 1 hour left before the city selection ends." This hour was enough for Li Qingchuan to kill Xiang Nan 100 times. Facing Xiang Fei who was running over, Li Qingchuan shook the sword in his hand. The sword hummed, and the sword energy alone sent Xiang Fei flying. Don't kill Xiang Nan. After Xiang Fei landed on the ground, she continued to crawl towards Xiang Nan. At this moment, she could no longer care about everyone's elegant demeanor. She screamed, "All the famous brands are yours. Please don't kill Xiang Nan." Xiang Nan was the Xiang clan's last hope. If even he died, the Xiang clan would truly be doomed and would never be able to turn over. A faint smile appeared on Li Qingchuan's face. He stepped on the ground with his right foot and the circular air waves knocked Xiang Fei out twice. At this moment, Li Qingchuan had already arrived in front of Xiang Nan. He looked down at Xiang Nan condescendingly and suddenly asked, "Do you regret it? Do you beg for mercy? If you beg for mercy now, I can let you live." Xiang Nan still laughed heartily, but his laughter was too weak. "Do you regret it? I only regret being sophisticated in the human world and meeting people who are unreasonable. I have never regretted martial arts. Since you dare to step into martial arts, you should be willing to fight with your life. If you want me to be a dignified martial artist, you can only be killed. You don't know how to beg for mercy. Li Qingchuan, do it. Li Qingchuan nodded his head and waved his right hand. The sword in his hand condensed into the weather before humming again. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. But at the same time, everyone was moved by Xiang Nan's words. Li Qingchuan smiled and his right hand shook rapidly. A sword light flashed in front of him, while Xiang Nan lay on the ground, not even moving his eyebrows. He just accepted it calmly. However, that sword did not land on Xiang Nan. Instead, something floated down and landed on Li Qingchuan's hand. It was a famous brand with 3 words written on it, Li Qingchuan. Li Qingchuan personally cut off his own brand. Xiang Nan was also surprised and looked at Li Qingchuan strangely. Li Qingchuan took a deep breath. He raised his head and said, as the saying goes, human nature is originally good. No one is born to do evil. Xiang Nan smiled and listened to Li Qingchuan's words seriously. Li Qingchuan lowered his head and smiled. Actually, when I first came into contact with martial arts when I was young, I could be said to have thousands of beautiful dreams about the world of martial arts, just like grass that broke through the ground and saw warm sunlight for the first time. However, the more I grew up, the more I discovered that this world of martial arts was dirty. However, what was dirty was not martial arts, but people's hearts. It was all because of people's hearts that the world of martial arts became intrigued and schemed against each other. Everyone plotted against each other. The world of martial arts in my heart is not like this. Li Qingchuan's words caused all the martial practitioners to tremble and lowered their heads thoughtfully. Li Qingchuan took a deep breath and said, therefore, Li Qingchuan, have never admired any experts. Those experts can only make me feel awe and fear, but not admiration. But I saw a martial spirit on you. I saw the demeanor of a martial artist, so I admire you and thank you. Speaking of this, Li Qingchuan respectfully placed the nameplate between his 2 fingers in Xiang Nan's hand. He raised his head and shouted, I, Li Qingchuan, hereby announce that I will give up my nameplate and be willing to admit defeat to Xiang Nan. Li Qingchuan's words aroused the hopes and dreams of every martial artist present. However, this world would never take the initiative to adapt to humans. Only people could adapt to the world. In this incomparably cruel martial law of survival, everyone gradually lost their original hearts. In order to survive, their hearts changed color. At this moment, the young contestants on the 4 mountain peaks also unknowingly came to Xiang Nan's side. The contestants stepped forward one after another and silently took off their badges on their chests. They respectfully placed them beside Xiang Nan. As more and more people gathered, more and more famous brands piled up beside Xiang Nan into a small hill. Xiang Nan was stunned. Xiang Fei was also stunned. Including the organizers of the selection of Martial Arts City, whether it was the City Lord of Bluestone City or the messengers of several large sects, they were all stunned. Senior brother. Elder Yu was touched and said, have you ever seen such a scene in your lifetime? Elder Yu's senior brother only shook his head, but he didn't know what to say to express his heart. In the end, apart from the dead contestants, all the contestants gave their brands to Xiang Nan. In a martial arts city election, Xiang Nan actually won the championship. This was an unprecedented martial arts city selection with only one winner. Chapter 102 Selection of Disciples. The sect envoys were all silent. This battle, which was dominated by Xiang Nan, was not only exciting, but there was also a thought-provoking alarm bell for the word martial arts behind it. What should the world of martial arts be like? Perhaps 100 people have 100 different opinions. However, when everyone first came into contact with martial arts, they all longed for a world of chivalry and courage, throwing their heads and spilling hot blood. Don't admire others, don't tell yourself sadness, if there is wind and frost, your path is calm. This was the martial way. The martial Tao of the present world, however, was tainted with the aura of too many merchants. They bullied the weak with their martial arts and humiliated human dignity with their martial arts. Before Xiang Nan killed the enemy, he never used words to humiliate the enemy's dignity, nor did he use force to toy with the enemy's bottom line. Instead, he cut it off with a single saber. It caused your entire body to collapse in a fierce battle. Although there was still an hour left before the martial arts city election officially ended, the scene at this moment indicated that the city selection had ended ahead of schedule. Everyone walked out of the vast forest. Everyone surrounded Xiang Nan and sat cross-legged in a circle. They quietly waited for the moment the end signal was issued. On the flying ship, City Lord Hongzhen sighed with emotion and nodded with emotion. After that, he cupped his fists and cupped his hands to the crowd, saying, "What Hongzhen did earlier was rather reckless. I hope everyone can forgive me. But as a city lord, I have something to say now." Everyone looked at Hongzhen. Hongzhen said, "This selection of martial arts city is quite special. It can also be said to be unprecedented, because all the contestants in the arena have lost, and only Xiang Nan won. However, I hope that the sect envoys and friends can choose the contestants at their discretion and respect the strength displayed by the contestants. Those young people who volunteer their famous brands also have potential. On behalf of Bluestone City, I, Hongzhen, am here to thank everyone in advance." "City Lord, you're welcome." Elder Yu smiled faintly. "We naturally know that because Xiang Nan won alone, we won't choose any other contestants. Don't worry. Thank you so much." Only then did Hongzhen's heart land on the ground. If they forcefully chose according to the rules of the city selection, it would be the six sects snatching Xiang Nan alone. This was very unfair to the other contestants. However, at this moment, Elder Yu of the Cavalry sect looked at Wang Xiaoyun of the Blazing Fire sect with a heavy heart. Hongzhen's city master had caught her in this detail, but Hongzhen frowned and thought about it, but he couldn't think of a reason. Below. In the last hour, everyone chose to rest on the spot. Xiang Nan's body had also recovered very well during this entire hour. The remaining medicinal power of the demon origin fruit was repairing Xiang Nan's losses. After about half an hour, Xiang Nan had already recovered by 77 to 88%. At this point, everyone surrounded Xiang Nan and excitedly asked Xiang Nan about the battles. A series of unfamiliar martial skills that Xiang Nan had used in battle had become the focus of everyone's attention. "Xiang Nan, is there a limit to the Azure Dragon going out to sea? Is the stronger the enemy, the stronger the Azure Dragon going out to sea? If you encounter a Heaven Origin Realm expert, will the Azure Dragon still be able to play its role? Xiang Nan, that move that shocked Long Yao Ri is so powerful. Could it be that if you accumulate more Saber Chi, this move will be even stronger? For example, if you accumulate 1,000,000 Saber Chi, wouldn't you be invincible under the heavens?" "That's right. Where did you learn those martial skills? Is it the Xiang clan's martial skill?" Xiang Nan was not stingy and answered everyone's questions directly. He smiled and said, "The Azure Dragon has its limits when it comes to going out to sea. For example, a small grass that grows under a giant rock can overturn the giant rock. But if there is a mountain pressing down on the grass, then there is nothing I can do." Xiang Nan turned around and replied to another person, "The reason why Jing Long Yao Ri could only condense a dozen or so strands of Saber Chi is because this is the limit. No matter how much saber chi there is, it will collapse. However, regarding the origin of this set of martial skills related to the dragon, Xiang Nan did not say it out loud. Everyone was very tactful and did not hold on to it. Those lightning bolts of yours, did they really come from this saber? Right at this moment, a very sensitive sentence entered Xiang Nan's ears. Everyone also looked at the saber. The person who asked this question was Immo, who had just recovered. He had personally seen Wampo Arian gift this black saber to Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan didn't want to deceive them directly, but he didn't intend to expose his talent. He reached out and grabbed the giant black scale saber in his hand. When the black scale escaped Xiang Nan's control, it turned into an ordinary mortal weapon. However, once it was held in Xiang Nan's hand, lightning immediately flickered on the black saber. As for the black saber's grade, it had also leapt to the beginner earth grade. As expected, it's really a good weapon. Immo sighed and said, I am convinced that you have defeated me. An hour passed quickly, and the light shield in the sky slowly dissipated. The huge flying ship descended to the top of everyone's heads. Right above, Hongzhen's clear voice said, the selection of martial arts city is officially over. Now, let's begin the sect selection stage. This place will be handed over to the messengers and friends of the major sects to preside over. Hearing these words, all the contestants became excited and eager to try. Only Xiang Nan stared at Wang Xiaoyun vigilantly. He killed 2 siblings of the Wang clan, but at this moment, the Wang clan's performance was surprisingly quiet. If something unusual happens, there must be a demon. This kept Xiang Nan on guard. At this time, the cavalry sect was the first to stand out. Elder Yu's senior brother cupped his fists at the crowd and said, I am Yu Zuren, the second-generation elder of the cavalry sect. Since everyone except Xiang Nan has lost their famous brands, our cavalry sect will use your actual performance as a reference for selecting disciples. As he spoke, Yu Zuren looked at Immo and said, Immo, are you willing to join my cavalry sect? Immo was stunned. He didn't expect that he would be defeated so badly by Xiang Nan. There were still sects willing to accept him. He immediately clasped his hands and wanted to speak. Wait! At the side, Yu Bufan of the Absolute Saber sect stood up and said, my Absolute Saber sect also wants Immo. Such an outstanding talent naturally belongs to our Fierce Tiger sect. Wait, Immo is strong and strong. He is a strength-type martial artist, so he is naturally the first choice of our Berserk Lion sect. The 5 third-grade sects were all competing for Immo. Only Wang Xiaoyun from the Blazing Fire sect remained silent and didn't even look at Immo. Wang Xiaoyun's actions caused Immo's heart to be very disappointed. He knew that Wang Jingyun's death had something to do with him. The people of the Wang clan were very vengeful. No matter how outstanding Immo was, Wang Xiaoyun was determined not to recruit Immo. As such, the other 5 third-grade sects heaved a sigh of relief. Since the 5 sects were competing for one Immo, it was only natural that the 5 sects would reveal their sect characteristics and advantages on the spot. Even Yu Bufan took out the essence transformation pill for the second time in an attempt to bribe Immo. Chapter 103 No one asked. After some thought, Immo finally chose the cavalry gate. The other 4 sect envoys all shook their heads and sighed. It was as if a piece of meat had been dug out of their hearts. Unfortunately. Xiang Nan. Immo walked forward and stretched out his right hand. There is no deep hatred between us. I have said this more than once. I'm going to the cavalry sect in the future. Perhaps there will be a long time before we meet again, or perhaps we will never meet again in this life. But after we leave, we are both Bluestone people. Why don't we just shake hands and make peace?" Xiang Nan smiled and shook hands with Mo Hai. After Mo Hai was chosen by the cavalry sect, Elder Yu and Elder Yu Zuren's faces turned red with joy. Next up was Li Qingchuan. The impression that this person had left on everyone earlier was actually not good. Everyone thought that he was just a dog leg of Mo Hai. But at the end of the city selection, Li Qingchuan's heart-piercing words to Xiang Nan had infected many people. In the end, Li Qingchuan was chosen by the third grade sect and the White Sword sect. This was the only sect on the scene that matched Li Qingchuan. That Li Qingchuan was also good at using swords. "Brother Hai, thank you for taking care of me for so many years." Li Qingchuan anticipated that he would leave soon, so he felt something. He knelt down on one knee to Mo Hai and cupped his fists. "In the future, the heavens will part ways, and I will never forget you in my heart as a big brother." Mo Hai laughed loudly and patted Li Qingchuan's shoulder. "You and I will always be brothers. I wish you a bright future for brother." Li Qingchuan walked towards Xiang Nan and said, "I admit that I was jealous of you and hated you. I don't beg you to forgive me for what I did, but just as Brother Hai said, after we left, we were both Bluestone people." Xiang Nan interrupted Li Qingchuan with a smile and said, "There's no need to say anything. I still have to thank you for showing mercy in the end. The grudges of the past should be written off." When everyone saw this scene, they all smiled happily. Especially Elder Yu, she admired Xiang Nan more and more, but the more she did, the deeper the worry on Elder Yu's face became. Apart from Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan, the experts who had followed Kai Jianyun had also been chosen by the various sects. The other members of the Xiang clan were all defeated. As for Mo Hai's younger brother, Maki, he went to the Fierce Tiger sect. When everyone was selected, the contestants all began to shake hands. Before the city selection, they treated each other as opponents. However, once the city selection was over, they would have to go their separate ways in the future, and the feeling of parting would become even more intense. Because they all had the same hometown, and that was Bluestone. In the end, excluding the players who had died in the Black Shark Demon Forest, a total of more than 20 of the 300 players had been selected. This elimination rate was already very high. In the end, there was only one person left, Xiang Nan, who had yet to be selected. Countless pairs of eyes landed on Xiang Nan. They were all looking forward to which sect Xiang Nan would enter. But at this moment, everyone's mood was complicated, because Qihua sect, the strongest second-rate sect, had never chosen anyone. This sect is most suitable for Xiang Nan. However, Wang Xiaoyun of the Blazing Fire sect was also Xiang Nan's greatest enemy. More people's eyes fell on Wang Xiaoyun. Was Wang Xiaoyun putting the overall situation first and adding an outstanding martial artist disciple to Qihua sect, or was he putting selfishness first and ignoring Xiang Nan? Everyone was quietly waiting. However, after 5 minutes, Wang Xiaoyun remained unmoved. He only stared at Xiang Nan with a meaningful smile on his face. Xiang Nan did not intend to enter the Blazing Fire sect at all. Even if the Blazing Fire sect chose him, he would not go. However, strangely enough, not only did the Blazing Fire sect not say anything, but even the other 5 sects remained indifferent. At first, everyone thought that the 5 sects didn't dare to compete with Qihua sect for Xiang Nan, but after 10 minutes, no one spoke. City Lord Hongzhen couldn't bear to watch any longer. He hurriedly asked, "Are there any conditions that you haven't mentioned? Why did you leave out Xiang Nan alone?" The messengers of the 5 sects all had bitter expressions on their faces. City Lord Hongjun was shocked. How could such a thing happen? Could it be that another new record of the Blue Stone Martial City selection is about to be born? That was the result of Xiang Nan gaining the unanimous vote alone, but in the end, no one paid any attention to it. The other contestants were also dumbfounded. Xiang Nan's performance was so dazzling. He should be the fiercest contestant in the competition. How could the result be exactly the opposite? Xiang Nan himself did not expect this scene to occur. His face was first blank, and then he looked at Wang Xiaoyun with enlightenment. At this time, Wang Xiaoyun also looked at Xiang Nan. The two of them exchanged glances. Wang Xiaoyun laughed mockingly and said, "Everyone, have you already picked everyone? Nobody wants to continue picking anymore, right?" The 5 third-grade sects remained silent. Xiang Nan was actually defeated. What exactly is going on? City Lord Hongjun was furious and shouted, "You didn't want the first place in the city selection. According to the rules of the competition, Xiang Nan has obtained all the famous brands. If Xiang Nan really failed, then the Xiang clan would be in a terrible situation." The Xiang clan was not the only enemy of the Wang clan. The reason why the Wang clan had repeatedly bullied the Xiang clan was because apart from the Wang clan, there were also the Mo clan and the Li clan. Moreover, there was now another Bluestone City's Kai clan. Once Xiang Nan was defeated, the 4 families would probably have to eat all of the Xiang family's food. These 4 clans have a total of 4 Heaven Origin Realm experts. Everyone, don't be stunned. Hurry up and choose. Xiao Nan is the first winner. Don't you want to choose him? Xiang Fei begged anxiously. At this time, Xiang Nan smiled and shook his head at Xiang Fei. "Sister Fei, you have to have backbone. Since they don't choose, we don't have to plead bitterly. Forget it." Suddenly, the cavalry menu elder gritted her teeth and shouted, "Xiang Nan, you can be willing to enter me." Everyone's spirits were lifted, and Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan heaved a sigh of relief. But at this moment, Yuzuren suddenly grabbed Elder Yu's wrist and whispered, "Junior sister, don't be reckless." Elder Yu's eyes turned red with anxiety. "Senior brother. Xiang Nan is a top candidate regardless of character or talent. Do we have to let go of such a good seedling?" Yuzuren's hand that was grabbing Elder Yu also began to tremble, but he could only endure spitting out the words, "The overall situation is of utmost importance." These 4 words caused Elder Yu to feel as if her backbone had been extracted, and she was absent-minded all of a sudden. 2 days ago, Wang Xiaoyun's conspiracy words on the flying ship echoed in Elder Yu's mind once again. "I, Wang Xiaoyun, do not ask everyone to break the rules of the city selection for me, but I only have one request, and that is, no one is allowed to choose the Xiang family. If anyone dares to disobey my orders, then don't blame our Blazing Fire sect for being ruthless to them." Chapter 104 One Man and One Knife. Who would dare to offend a second-rate sect? Although Wang Xiaoyun was young, he was a core disciple that the Blazing Fire sect had focused on cultivating. The fact that the Blazing Fire sect had Wang Xiaoyun, a young disciple, represent the sect in selecting people was enough to prove how important Wang Xiaoyun was in the eyes of the elders of the Blazing Fire sect. When the conversation between Yuzuren and Elder Yu reached this point, everyone who didn't lose their minds would also think of the cause and effect. City Lord Hongjun looked at Wang Xiaoyun in shock and said angrily, "Wang Xiaoyun, you actually dare to disturb the rules of the city selection." Hongjun knew that the Wang clan had a lot of grudges and were all villains, but he didn't expect Wang Xiaoyun to dare to go so far. It was so bad. Wang Xiaoyun said calmly, Lord City Lord, be careful what you say. When did I disturb the rules of the city selection? If there is no evidence, it's best to swallow it. Other people are unwilling to choose Xiang Nan. That's someone else's own business. Can you force it? Hong Zhen was trembling with anger, but what could he do? At this time, Wang Xiaoyun looked at Xiang Nan and sneered, Xiang Nan, do you remember what you said in the Colosseum? Don't let you rise to prominence. As you wish, I have fulfilled your wish. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes. To tell the truth, he did not expect Wang Xiaoyun to have such a move. No matter how powerful you, Xiang Nan are, I won't choose you. What can you do? Then now. Wang Xiaoyun looked around the crowd and said, has the other 5 sects finished selecting people? I need a definite answer. It's over. The Absolute Saber sect was the first to express their stance. Immediately after, the Fierce Tiger sect, the Berserk Lion sect, and the White Sword sect also expressed that they would no longer choose disciples. On the other side of the cavalry gate, Elder Yu was also helpless under Zuren's forceful control. Xiang Nan. At this moment, Elder Yu rushed in front of Xiang Nan and said with tears in her eyes, I said in the Colosseum that day that if you join my cavalry sect, I will protect your entire family. Today, I betrayed my promise and didn't choose you. I'm the one who let you down. This arm can be considered as apologizing to you. Junior sister, you can't. Yu Zuren was shocked and hurriedly rushed forward to intercept her. However, a sword light flashed in front of everyone. That Elder Yu had already severed her left arm, and blood was spraying out continuously. Everyone was shocked. Junior sister, why are you doing this? Yu Zuren's eyes also turned red. However, Elder Yu ignored her pain and looked at Xiang Nan guiltily. Elder Yu had indeed made a simple verbal agreement with Xiang Nan, but it was only a verbal agreement. Not to mention breaking her promise, even if he was ungrateful, would the matter of revenge happen less in Bluestone City, and even in the entire world of martial arts? Who would be willing to cut off his left arm for the sake of a single word? The heroes among these women even made many men feel ashamed. Xiang Nan's pupils also shrank. He hurriedly knelt down on one knee and caught the broken arm with both hands. He respectfully said, Elder Yu, in my heart, you are not a treacherous person. Thank you for looking up to this nameless junior, Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan also dares not forget your kindness to take care of him. If there is another day, Xiang Nan will definitely repay her. You don't have to feel sorry for me. A man dares to do what he deserves. If he dares to kill, he dares to shoulder it. Today, Xiang Nan's life and death will be decided by heaven's will. With that, Xiang Nan respectfully delivered the broken arm to Yu Zuren. No one expected things to reach this point, but the tragic scene before them touched the softness in everyone's hearts. At this point, Elder Yu Zuren publicly announced that he would no longer recruit any disciples. In that case, the city selection is over. The smile on Wang Xiaoyun's face gradually became hostile. Xiang Nan still didn't look at Wang Xiaoyun. Instead, he bowed to Elder Yu and said, Xiang Nan's death is not worth cherishing. Elder Wang Yu is easy to recuperate. I wish you well for 1,000 years. With that, Xiang Nan held the saber in his hand and faced Wang Xiaoyun, straightening his waist. Even if he were to die, he would still die in a grand and upright manner. The hostility on Wang Xiaoyun's face grew more and more serious as he said, Lord City Lord, the city selection is over. It is now a grudge between our Wang Xiang clan. You have nothing to say anymore. Hong Zhen gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. However, He was helpless now. Wang Xiaoyun raised his head and laughed. His eyes were filled with monstrous hatred. His laughter abruptly stopped. Then, he pointed his sword at Xiang Nan and said, "Little brat surnamed Xiang, I want to see where else you can escape to this time." When he said this, Wang Xiaoyun almost gritted his teeth in hatred. Behind him, Wang Chanhe also walked over angrily. The Kai clan's Kai Baohua also led a group of experts to surround Xiang Nan. As for the Mo clan and the Li clan, they were somewhat moved. In the end, they did not stand out and maintained a neutral attitude. However, Wang Chanhe and Kai Baohua were first-level Heavenly Yuan Realm experts, while Wang Xiaoyun was 5th-level Origin Returning Realm experts. Apart from that, there were more than 30 Origin Realm experts among the Wang clan and Kai clan's uncles. With so many people surrounding Xiang Nan could no longer fly. Xiang Nan was in a one-sided desperate situation. First, a soft palm force shook Xiang Fei away, knocking Xiang Fei unconscious. Then, he took out a jar of liquor from his storage ring and drank heavily. He didn't swallow the last mouthful of liquor, but instead sprayed it onto the black saber. He immediately swung his saber horizontally and laughed loudly, "Come. If I, Xiang Nan, raise my eyebrows, I will be considered to have no backbone." Facing such a desperate situation, Xiang Nan still stood there with his saber in his hand, drinking and laughing happily. This scene shook the hearts of some people. What a backbone brat! Today, I will take your life. Wang Chanhe was the first to charge out. As a Heavenly Yuan first-layer expert, the Yuan Qi on Wang Chanhe's sword surged into the night, and a heavenly and earth-shattering sword light slashed down. "Don't worry, I'll kill you. I'll kill all of the Xiang clan members soon, and you won't be alone on your way to the Yellow Springs either. This little bastard Xiang Nan belongs to my Kai clan." Kai Baohua also flew into the sky and struck Xiang Nan Meng with his palm. A gigantic Yuan Qi palm howled towards them like a black cloud pressing down on them. 2 Heaven Origin Realm experts attacked at the same time. That scene was so vast that it was simply incomparable to a city selection battle. As the city lord, although Hongzhen wanted to save Xiang Nan, he didn't have any strength left. He immediately released his Yuan Qi and swept away all the contestants and their clansmen, quickly leaving the battlefield. The 2 Heavenly Yuan Masters only released one move, which was enough for all the youths at close range to be shocked to death. Xiang Nan pulled out his saber and stood up. Facing a sword beam that descended from the sky, a palm of Yuan Qi that covered the sky and the earth could only be seen with a resolute expression on his face. His saber-wielding back looked so bleak. "Good job!" Xiang Nan shouted loudly. He actually held a long saber in his hand and welcomed him. Even if he died, he would never take a single step back. Chapter 105 Battle of Backwater. Who dares to hurt my grandson? At this critical moment, a white-bearded old man stepped into the air, followed by a gigantic hand print that shone brightly. The gigantic hand seal seemed to have been cast by the sun, cancelling out Wang Chanhe and Kai Baohua's attacks in midair. "Grandfather." Xiang Nan suddenly paused and couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. "Tianyuan first layer." Wang Chanhe and Kai Baohua exchanged glances and shouted, "Xiang Zhanxiong, this old bastard, has actually stepped into the first level of the Heavenly Yuan realm." Xiang Zhanxiong was followed by a large number of clansmen holding the Xiang clan spear, including the 3 elders of the Origin realm, as well as several experts of the uncle generation. "Xiang Nan. Today, the Xiang clan stands with you and answers the enemy together." Many members of the Xiang clan shouted in unison. Xiang Nan felt his heart heat up, and his nose was a little sour. That's what it feels like to be close. Whoever dares to hurt my son, I will not rest until we die. Even Xiang Nan's father, Xiang Shaohua, who was only at the body-tempering realm, had come. Thanks to Xiang Nan's help, Xiang Zhanxiong, who had just stepped into the first level of the heavenly Yuan realm, had entangled Wang Changhe and Kai Baohua from the start. Under the leadership of the Grand Elder, many members of the Xiang clan also went to fight against the experts of the Origin realm from the Wang and Kai clans. However, the difference in strength and numbers between the two sides was too great. There were more than 30 Origin realm experts from the Wang and Kai clans. The Xiang clan only had a dozen or so Origin realm experts. These 10 or so people had been nurtured before the Xiang clan had fallen. As soon as the three sides exchanged blows, the Xiang clan fell into a disadvantageous position. They were in a suppressed situation and could only barely hold on, but they were unable to make an effective counterattack. Within a minute, one of the Xiang clan's 5th-level Gue Yuan experts was injured, and the Great Elder was wandering around the clan, using his 7th-level Gue Yuan strength to constantly block attacks for his clansmen. However, this could only delay for a bit. It was simply not enough to turn the situation around. Old man Xiang, I didn't expect that you would actually ascend to the Heaven Origin realm, but today is the day you die from hatred. Wang Changhe held the long sword in his hand and slashed open the air. He shouted, "Flying Cloud Sword, charge at night." The power of this sword was boundless. It was an earth-grade beginner martial skill. Behind the gigantic sword light was a faint snake-eyed phantom that opened its eyes. This unique martial skill was definitely not owned by the Wang clan, but brought back by Wang Xiaoyun from the Blazing Fire sect. Kai Baohua similarly waved his palm and shouted, "Kai clan palm, cloud flipping palm." With Kai Baohua's palm strike, the Yuan Qi palm print was incomparably huge, but it was much weaker than Wang Changhe's attack. It was weaker than a martial skill, and it was a high-grade spiritual grade. Xiang Zhanxiong stepped on the air, his hands and wrists joined together. At the same time, he pushed out both of his palms and shouted, "One leaf shades the sun." This palm slapped out two enormous Yuan Qi palm prints. The two palm prints combined together, resembling a furious roaring flaming phoenix, and the two palms were the phoenix's feathered wings. This move came from the Earth-grade elementary-grade martial skill, Sang Yuan Tian Yang Palm, that Xiang Nan gave Xiang Zhanxiong. Because these three heavenly Yuan realm martial artists did not possess the heavenly meridian attribute, they decided the outcome based on their own cultivation and martial skills. Xiang Zhanxiong's sunshade palm immediately defeated Kai Baohua's cloud-flipping palm, and then the sword light that was convenient for Wang Changhe collided with each other. After Xiang Zhanxiong's Yuan Qi palm destroyed Kai Baohua's palm, it had weakened a lot. When it encountered Wang Changhe's sword light, both of them exploded. Wang Changhe stood motionless in midair, while Xiang Zhanxiong took a few steps back, blood spilling out from the corner of his mouth. Wang Changhe smiled sinisterly and said, "Old Master Kai, I'm the main attacker. Help me." After saying that, Wang Changhe slashed another sword, Flying Cloud Sword. The sword provokes mountains and rivers. When the sword slashed out, the enormous sword light suddenly turned dark red, as if it was a poisonous letter from a fierce snake. Especially, the sword light was wrapped around the phantom image of a fierce snake, like an old vine-coiled tree. Xiang Zhan's ambition shook abruptly. He immediately raised his right hand and the sky disappeared. It was as if the sky had suddenly darkened for a moment and returned to normal in an instant. However, Xiang Zhanxiong's entire right hand emitted a dazzling light. A palm strike was one of the moves in the blue origin heavenly young palm, dazzling to cover the stars. That enormous palm was really like the condensation of sunlight. It could be said to be glowing brightly, illuminating the black sharp demon forest. Wherever his eyes could reach, it was as bright as day. Sun Yuan's heavenly young palm collided with the sword light of the mountain and river. The heavenly young palm and even young Jilia's martial skill, while the flying cloud sword laws belonged to the most mean and poisonous. The sword palms collided with each other, and a strong wind instantly blew out, uprooting countless ancient trees one after another, causing a fierce wind to wreak havoc in the sky. Such a strong wind was enough to easily crush any expert at the 5th level of origin return. Moreover, this was only the strong wind that came with the collision of martial skills. For a moment, the palm sword junction revealed a strange scene of half red and half white light, causing the sky to change color. Just as the two sides were in a deadlock, Kai Baohua suddenly inserted himself from the side and viciously slapped at Xiang Zhanxiong. Although his palm strike was only a high-grade spirit-grade martial skill, Xiang Zhanxiong didn't have any extra energy to deal with it. He could only hastily pull out his palm power and dodge Kai Baohua's sneak attack. As a result, Xiang Zhanxiong's heavenly young palm dissipated on its own. Wang Changhe's sword light broke free and shot straight at Xiang Zhanxiong. Xiang Zhanxiong used all of his strength to forcefully twist his body in midair, dodging a sword strike. However, the sinister sword light brushed past Xiang Zhanxiong, causing his right arm to turn purple. "Not good, I'm poisoned." Xiang Zhanxiong was shocked, and he hurriedly used his left hand to condense his fierce yuan qi and fiercely slapped it on his right arm. At this moment, the purple-red poisonous gas on his right arm was sprinting wildly. It had already reached bow neck, and wherever it passed, the skin quickly rotted and suppurated. After thinking about how Xiang Zhanxiong could save himself in time, he used his heavenly young palm to neutralize the poison, but his right arm was already riddled with wounds. "Haha." Wang Changhe smiled sinisterly. "Old man Xiang, you have just stepped into the heaven origin realm, yet you dare to fight me? You really don't know whether to die or not. Do a few more moves, I will definitely take your dog's life." Wang Changhe raised his sword high and pointed it at the sky. The black night sky before dawn became even darker. In a trance, there seemed to be a purple python phantom in the sky, soaring into the air. As the phantom descended, it left a strange snake-shaped purple mark in the air. When the python phantom rushed onto the sword suddenly began to tremble. Before it could even swing its sword, large droplets of purple liquid began to flow down the sword. He didn't know whether the liquid was a phantom or a real object, but when the liquid landed on the broken half of the ancient tree root, the ancient tree was immediately corroded, and in the blink of an eye, it actually melted into a pool of purple water. Xiang Zhanxiong's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected the name of the Blazing Fire sect to be so masculine, but his martial skills were so vicious. On the other side, Xiang Nan, who had lost his enemy, was targeted by Wang Xiaoyun, who had been waiting for an opportunity for a long time. Chapter 106 Battle of Tianyuan. The confrontation between experts of the Heaven Origin realm caused countless Xiantian realm contestants to be enthralled and their hearts to tremble endlessly. In the eyes of low realm martial artists like them, the attacks of experts of the heavenly Yuan realm seemed to be able to shake mountains and rivers, causing the sun and moon to change color. It was simply incomprehensible. At this moment, the sword radiance of Wang Changhe's sword strike was not huge. It was only 100 meters long. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, this length was already a shocking scene that could pierce through the heavens and earth. The 100-meter sword light shot out, causing the surrounding air to distort. At first glance, it was dazed and blurry. This abnormal expression of the air was caused by the strange poison on the sword light. Xiang Zhanxiong did not dare to underestimate his opponent at all. He raised his hands high up and the stars in the sky shone. The light on his palms quickly obscured the light of stars and moons. Although this scene was only seen by the martial artists below, it was enough to prove how powerful Xiang Zhanxiong's palm strike was. Xiang Zhanxiong gathered his palm power and shouted in a deep voice, "Heavenly Yang Palm." This move matched the name of the Blue Origin Heavenly Yang Palm itself, and was clearly the strongest move. Everyone could only see a huge spiral vortex of light suddenly appear in the sky above Xiang Zhanxiong's head. The vortex slowly rotated clockwise, engulfing the vast amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. As the vortex rotated, an unimaginable amount of spiritual energy was sucked into Xiang Zhanxiong's hand. This move of the Heavenly Yang Palm was immediately released. One side was 100 meters tall and 50 meters wide radiant palm print, slowly advancing forward. Sharp winds howled from both sides, shooting the clouds to see the moon. One sword and one palm collided once again. The gigantic palm print was corroded by the poisonous sword light. The palm print was first dyed with a strange purple color, and the purple color continued to spread in all directions. The enormous poisonous sword light was also purified by Gang Lai's Yuan Qi Palm, and the color of the sword light quickly faded. The terrifying martial skills of the two of them cancelled each other out and were about to dissipate. At this moment, Xiang Zhanxiong caught a glimpse of the scene and hurriedly shouted, "Protect little Nan." His distraction immediately gave Kai Baohua an opportunity to sneak around Xiang Zhanxiong's back and raise his hand to form 3 consecutive palms. Boom! In the sky, Xiang Zhanxiong's palm print and Wang Changhe's sword light finally reached their limits, both exploding. But behind him, Kai Baohua's 3 Yuan Qi palm prints also flew over. Xiang Zhanxiong's reaction was already fast. Unfortunately, he had lost the first chance. After dodging with all his might, he was still hit by Kai Baohua's 3rd palm. This palm landed on Xiang Zhanxiong's back. The entire palm print completely covered Xiang Zhanxiong, but in the middle of Xiang Zhanxiong's back, a small palm print suddenly appeared. The small palm print caused Xiang Zhanxiong's skin and flesh to cave in. 3 of his ribs were broken at the same time, and a mouthful of purple blood sprayed out. The giant palm, plus the small palm print, and the double palm force caused Xiang Zhanxiong's internal injuries to be severe and his internal organs to be injured. Grandfather! Xiang Nan saw this and hurriedly wanted to rush forward. However, at the same time, a fierce sword light slashed towards Xiang Nan's toes, causing soil to fly into the sky. This sword strike was used by Wang Xiaoyun. Fortunately, Xiang Nan's reaction was quick enough and he hurriedly stopped. Otherwise, his entire face would have been cut off. Little bastard, exchange for my younger brother and sister's lives. Wang Xiaoyun's face was filled with resentment. Just as he finished hacking the sword, he waved his left hand and a strand of Yuan Qi palm force appeared. This palm didn't use any martial skill at all. It was just a casual palm strike, but it was also condensed with the Yuan Qi of the 5th level of the Origin Reversion Realm. The speed of that palm power was already beyond the scope of a Xiantian realm martial artist's ability. Xiang Nan's reaction was astonishing, and he immediately retreated with the flash steps. But even so, it was too late. When he dodged Wang Xiaoyun's sword strike earlier, his body was already in a state of emergency. There must be a strong inertia when he stopped in a hurry. At this moment, he suddenly retreated, slowing down for a moment. The flash steps were astonishingly fast, allowing Xiang Nan to immediately dodge the Yuan Qi palm power, but he was unable to dodge the range of the palm power. The Yuan Qi palm landed 3 steps in front of Xiang Nan. This palm force was so shocking that it forcefully sent Xiang Nan, who was in the state of flash shadow steps, flying away. Although Xiang Nan was not directly hit by the palm force, the shockwave generated by the palm force affected Xiang Nan. There were also large pieces of small stones that were randomly shot everywhere under the bombardment of the palm force. These stones were all accompanied by Wang Xiaoyun's Yuan Qi, and they were extremely hard. Stones scattered everywhere, piercing through the air to the point of making ear-piercing sounds. Xiang Nan was first engulfed by the shockwave. His entire body was as if he had been hit by a meteor. His mind buzzed, and his ears buzzed endlessly. Then, the small stones pierced through Xiang Nan's body. Careless. This time, he was really careless. Last time in the Xiang manner, Xiang Nan was focused on avoiding Wang Xiaoyun's assassination and could barely survive. But this time, he was worried that his grandfather would be wrong step by step. By the time Xiang Nan landed, there were as many as 6 penetrating wounds all over his body. The spattered pebbles were extremely deadly. Apart from his chest and back, which were protected by the black armor, the 6 penetrating wounds were divided into 2 arms and legs at Xiang Nan's side. Xiang Nan landed on the ground and then sat up. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not stand up. This scene attracted everyone's attention. After all, everyone's main target was Xiang Nan. Even Xiang Zhanxiong, Wang Changhe, and Kai Baohua temporarily stopped fighting and looked at Xiang Nan. Xiao Nan. Xiang Zhanxiong panicked and hurriedly went up to protect his grandson. However, Wang Changhe and Kai Baohua exchanged glances, both of them entangling Xiang Zhanxiong. Wang Changhe laughed sinisterly and said, "Old man Xiang, I'll let you see for yourself how your grandson was tortured to death today. I'll send you to your death after you see this scene." In the distance, in the Xiang Nan battle circle, Wang Xiaoyun took a step into the sky and pointed his sword at Xiang Nan from above, shouting, "Little bastard, you should go crazy for me now. Didn't you say you wanted to kill me? *CK your ancestors. Little bitch, if you dare to shout at me, I will take your dog life." Wang Xiaoyun was furious and didn't care about his identity at all. He actually cursed on the spot. Wang Xiaoyun cursed and raised the sword in his hand. In the air above the sword, a giant viper head phantom gradually took shape. Beneath the heavens, the sinister and terrifying giant snake was like a ghost. It was as if at this moment, within a few miles, it had turned into a terrifying hell. "Let's see where you're going this time. Earth Fiend, Snake King Sword." Everyone was stunned. This was the first time they had seen the Earth Fiend Snake King Sword. They were all shocked by the might of that martial skill. The terrifying scene of this sword strike had actually caught up to the scene of 3 heavenly Yuan masters. Hiss. Yu Bufan sucked in a breath of cold air from the Absolute Saber sect. Too shocking. The terrifying power contained in this sword actually came from the hands of a 5th-level origin returning martial cultivator. Chapter 107 Supreme Sparrow King. When the Xiang clan saw the Earth Fiend Snake King Sword, they all revealed expressions of despair. Back then, when Xiang Zhanxiong was still at the 9th level of the Origin Realm, he had to use all of his strength to receive the Earth Fiend Snake King Sword. However, Xiang Nan was only at the 9th level of the Xiantian Realm. How? Xiang Nan himself knew this. He deeply understood that even if his current strength was 50 times higher than before, he would definitely not be able to catch Wang Xiaoyun's sword. Thinking of this, Xiang Nan raised a sad smile and said, "Wang Xiaoyun, you just want to kill me. Forget it. Since that's the case, let's end this today." At this point, the sad smile on Xiang Nan's face had changed into a resolute expression that looked at death as if he were returning home. Using his own strength to fight against Wang Xiaoyun, it was certain that he would die. In that case, he could only rely on external forces that did not belong to him. Thinking of this, Xiang Nan sat down cross-legged and raised the black-scaled saber high in his right hand. Immediately after, the lightning talisman sealed with white flames and lightning flew out of his storage ring. At the same time, he plunged the giant saber into the ground. The thunder talisman instantly drilled into the tip of the giant saber and was stabbed into the ground by the 3-meter saber. Everyone was shocked by the power of the Earth Fiend Snake King sword, and no one noticed Xiang Nan's small movements. Following that, Xiang Nan flicked his left hand on the black blade 3 times, producing 3 clanging sounds of metal colliding with each other. The 9 transformations of thunder shocked everyone. The lightning talisman that was hidden underground suddenly erupted with a ball of blazing white lightning. The entire blade of the black saber was wrapped in lightning. "Wang Xiaoyun, even if you kill me, I will skin you," Xiang Nan shouted loudly. At this time, Wang Xiaoyun's giant viper head phantom was completely intact. It was violently absorbing vast amounts of spiritual energy from heaven and earth. Ha 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 ha. Wang Xiaoyun's hair was disheveled and he laughed crazily. "I want to see how you can skin me." Xiang Nan simply closed his eyes and slowly used the Thunder King and King Sparrow seals. At this time, Xiang Nan's heart was like still water, neither seeing nor listening nor disrupting. At this moment, Xiang Nan ignored the 7 emotions, neither sad nor happy, neither angry nor worried. At this moment, Xiang Nan completely ignored all external factors, as if he was in a world that only belonged to him. It was the so-called thunder in silence, and Xiang Nan was giving birth to the thunder before the mountain rain came. At this moment, even time seemed to have slowed down. Everyone's movements were dozens of times slower. Even Wang Xiaoyun's heaven-shaking and earth-shattering sword strike was strangely slow. The formidable power condensed in Viper's head was slowly condensing into Wang Xiaoyun's sword. At the same time, Xiang Nan moved his hands, and the King Sparrow seal made the first gesture. Heavenly Fate Thunder Drawing Hand. This was the name of the first hand gesture of the King Sparrow seal. Xiang Nan bent his middle fingers and his 2 palms joined together. Within the lightning talisman, a violent white flame bolt of lightning was suddenly introduced into Xiang Nan's hands. In an instant, his fingers were wrapped in lightning. In the past, Xiang Nan had absorbed the power of lightning. Every time he absorbed the power of lightning in the next stream would be several levels stronger than the previous stream, and it would be closer to the power of the true body of lightning. This time, Xiang Nan did not absorb it. Instead, he directly used it. With Xiang Nan's current strength, he was unable to use such a powerful lightning power. However, he had originally treated death as if he were returning home and had made up his mind to fight Wang Xiaoyun's life. The second gesture was the Earth Soul Lightning Hand. Xiang Nan's hands turned backwards, his 8 fingers clasped together. His left thumb moved forward, and his right thumb moved backward. A ray of lightning flew out from the lightning talisman and merged into Xiang Nan's palm. The astonishing white lightning had already climbed onto the back of Xiang Nan's hand. The third gesture was to not move the thunder-gathering hand. Xiang Nan clenched his fists and clenched them together. A third ray of lightning poured into his hands. The lightning continued to climb along Xiang Nan's hands and reached his wrist. The terrifying power of lightning caused the skin on Xiang Nan's hands to begin to decompose. Skin fragments slowly left his body. Xiang Nan didn't stop. The fourth gesture was the fearless thunder refining hand. Xiang Nan clasped his middle fingers together, his four fingers hooked upside down, and his thumbs clasped together. The fourth bolt of lightning was channeled into his hands, and the white flames of lightning still surpassed his wrist and spread towards his forearm. The fifth hand gesture, Heavenly Dipper Lightning Transformation. A bolt of lightning attracted him, and the dense bolt of lightning had already climbed to the middle of his forearm. The sixth hand gesture, Dark Cloud Lightning Roar. A streak of lightning attracted him, and the dense white lightning climbed to his elbow. At this time, the skin on Xiang Nan's arms had fallen off even more severely, turning into melt. 1/3 of the flesh and blood on both arms had melted into liquid. Such an astonishing amount of power had even formed a spherical barrier of astral qi around Xiang Nan. With every additional bolt of lightning that Xiang Nan had, the barrier would expand in all directions. Every time this barrier expanded, everything would be destroyed, shattering the trees into dust, crushing the stones into powder, and burning the scorched earth into smoke. The seventh hand gesture, Divine Thunder Devouring Mountains and Rivers. A bolt of lightning attracted him, and the white light crawled over his elbow and spread towards his shoulder. The eighth hand gesture, Lightning Soul Moving Heaven and Earth. A bolt of lightning attracted him, and the white light climbed to the front of his shoulder. The rapidly liquefied flesh and blood in Xiang Nan's arms immediately vaporized. Almost half of the area was covered in white bones. The ninth hand gesture, Underworld King Thunder Rage. The lightning attracted him, and he had already climbed onto his shoulders. At this moment, the backs of Xiang Nan's two hands were covered with white lightning. The spherical aura shield surrounding him expanded by a radius of 10 meters. Within a radius of 10 meters, no martial artist dared to stay. The land where Xiang Nan was located had become a natural forbidden zone. There was no life left, nothing left. Even the ground beneath Xiang Nan disappeared in a hemisphere, and Xiang Nan sat cross-legged in the air. "What's that?" Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and cried out in alarm. Then, Xiang Zhanxiong's expression changed. Wang Chanhe and Kai Baohua exchanged a glance and both felt the terrifying change in Xiang Nan's aura. The sword in Wang Xiaoyan's hand had already descended from the sky and stabbed towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan's entire set of actions happened between lightning and flint. It was only his incomparable concentration that slowed down time in his senses. However, after 9 hand gestures, Xiang Nan suddenly opened his eyes. A dazzling white light flashed in his eyes. The 2 beams of lightning shot out, extremely shocking. Finally, in the end stance, Xiang Nan separated his palms and butted his fingers together, forming a prismatic gesture. He shouted, "Sparrow! King! Seal!" The little bird in the sky dived down, directly passing through the gap between Xiang Nan's hands, and was grabbed by Xiang Nan. "Go!" The veins on Xiang Nan's neck and forehead bulged out. He used all his strength and threw the little bird out. At that time, the heavens and the earth changed color, and the sun and moon did not shine. "Who?" A gale roared as a 10-meter-long lightning golden rock soared into the sky. Dragging a long tail of lightning, it shot straight into the 9 heavens. The thunder that had been silent for a long time finally erupted. Everyone was shrouded by the tens of thousands of white rays of light, and their faces turned pale in shock. Only Xiang Nan had a relieved expression on his face. He slowly lowered his arms and allowed his body to vaporize and spread to his chest and neck. This scene of death caused by enduring a large amount of lightning was uncontrollable. Wang Xiaoyun. When Xiang Nan was dying, he smiled and said, "If you want my life, then you have to leave something behind as a price." The 10-meter golden lightning rock descended from the sky and made a big dive, fiercely exploding towards Wang Xiaoyun. "Ha!" Wang Xiaoyun cried out in alarm and used all his strength to stab the Earth Fiend Snake King sword towards Xiang Nan. A sword and a bird met in the air. Chapter 108 The Glory of a Nobody. Wang Xiaoyun's most sinister and poisonous Snake King sword struck the golden lightning rock that was extremely fierce and pure yang. This sword strike was enough to destroy the martial skills of ordinary 9th level origin returning realm experts. Under the attention of everyone, it started a crazy battle with the golden lightning rock. In midair, a giant viper phantom vomited out a scarlet letter. The little bird turned into a golden lightning rock, more like a white flame vermilion bird that was reborn from a bath of fire. Its entire body was wrapped in burning white lightning, and a pair of fire eyes shot out 100,000 feet of white light. Everyone could feel the core of the battle circle. In that incomparable destruction, even warriors as powerful as the Heaven Origin realm had no choice but to bring their clansmen back quickly. At this moment, no one cared about fighting each other. As long as they didn't pay attention and were swept into the battle of the snake bird, they would definitely be doomed. Every martial artist only had one word in their hearts: escape. Quickly escape from the inner circle of the bird-snake struggle, the further away the better. Hurry! Hurry, the flying ship must leave. City Lord Hongzhen stepped into the air and his body suddenly grew stronger. He actually used his muscular hands to push the flying ship and save the innocent spectators on the flying ship. The flying ship also accelerated at full speed, not daring to stay at low altitude and flee like it was flying. Damn it! Hongzhen cursed. What exactly happened? The ultimate battle between Xiang Nan and Wang Xiaoyun has already reached the Heaven Origin realm. Furthermore, it's the extent to which a Heaven Origin realm expert has used all of his strength to attack. In just these 2 short breaths of time, the white photoelectric bird had already gained the upper hand, crazily suppressing the Earth Fiend Snake King sword. Seeing that the Earth Fiend Snake King sword was about to be destroyed, Wang Xiaoyun's face flushed red with anxiety. He bit the tip of his tongue and pushed his strength to the limit. As such, Wang Xiaoyun raised his right hand and slashed down with his sword. The image of the giant viper floating above his head was suddenly drawn into a long black gas. The black gas instantly merged into the sword light of the Earth Fiend Snake King sword, causing the originally shapeless sword light to suddenly transform into a black snake. The explosion caused the black light bird to suddenly wrap itself around it. The sharp snake fangs bit down on the lightning feathers on the lightning bird's body one bite at a time. Each bite pulled down a bolt of lightning from the white photoelectric bird's body. The bolts of lightning were torn off and slowly dissipated in midair. The white photoelectric bird was furious. Its sharp claws instantly dug into the black snake's body, causing the black snake to tremble. Immediately after, the lightning bird lowered its head and its sharp beak pierced through the head of the snake like an arrow that had disconnected from a string. The Earth Fiend Snake King sword was broken. How is this possible? This must be a dream. That little bastard surnamed Xiang is only at the 9th level of the Xiantian realm. How could he break my Earth Fiend Snake King sword? Wang Xiaoyun shrieked from the bottom of his heart. No matter how unwilling Wang Xiaoyun was, he had already lost. The white photoelectric bird's body had shrunk to 1/3 of its original size after fighting the black bird. It only had 3 meters of spread wings left. However, the white photoelectric bird did not stop and continued to charge towards Wang Xiaoyun. The lightning bird spun through the air and turned into a shuttle of light. The dense white flames crackled with lightning, and every crisp sound touched one's heart. Anger, fear, unwillingness, and despair wrapped around Wang Xiaoyun's heart. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyun lost control. He tilted the yuan qi in his body like a madman and slashed at the lightning bird crazily. In a short breath, Wang Xiaoyun had slashed hundreds of times. Hundreds of sword lights burst forth and landed on the lightning bird's body. And that lightning bird inherited the fearless spirit of the Thunder King seal, burning everything like a vermilion bird into the forest. The heavy sword light exploded without stopping for a moment. Finally, Wang Xiaoyun hacked out his last sword, and it was too late to hack out his next sword. Finally, the white photoelectric bird, which was only 2 meters long, smashed into Wang Xiaoyun's body. Boom! White light flashed across the sky. From Wang Xiaoyun's core, a white explosive wave rolled in all directions, like a drop of water dripping into a pot of oil. That scene seemed to have an extremely strong visual impact, as if a surging river was slamming onto the bluestone. Within a radius of nearly 10 kilometers, all the remaining trees bent down fiercely. Everyone's eyes were still wide open in the fierce winds, refusing to let go of every detail. As the lightning wave gradually dissipated, a figure appeared in the inner circle. That figure was slowly descending. After landing on the ground, his figure became clear. It was Wang Xiaoyun, who was bathed in blood. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Wang Xiaoyun's arm was broken. What a coincidence! The one who was blown off was also his left arm. This time, the Earth Fiend Snake King's sword did not touch Xiang Nan at all. On the other hand, Wang Xiaoyun's left arm was blown off. No one could say anything. They simply could not believe what they had seen. This was all too ridiculous. How could Xiang Nan, who was at the 9th level of the Xiantian realm, launch such a terrifying attack? However, Xiang Nan's situation was not optimistic at this moment. His 2 arms had already lost all their flesh and blood, leaving behind only 2 blood-stained arm bones and hand bones. Even his chest was slowly vaporizing, and even his left chest was vaporizing into a walnut-sized bloody hole. He could actually see his heart that was gradually failing and struggling inside. Xiang Nan was powerless to prevent his situation from deteriorating. Now, he could only wait for death. However, the corner of Xiang Nan's mouth was still smiling. He had won. Even if you, Wang Xiaoyun, can kill me, so what? I risked my life to break one of your arms. Elder Yu's arm was cut off. As long as he took a large amount of spirit pills, he could recover. However, Wang Xiaoyun did not want to have his left arm in his lifetime, because his left arm had been blown up and had long since dissipated with the dust. Wang Xiaoyun, who was covered in blood, lowered his head and looked at his broken arm in disbelief. After a deathly silence, Wang Xiaoyun screamed, "Xiang Nan! I'm going to scratch you one sword at a time." After saying that, Wang Xiaoyun rushed towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan laughed out loud, happy. "Wang Xiaoyun, what I lost was only one life, and what you lost is all your dignity." Xiao Nan, Xiang Zhanxiong, Xiang Xiaohua, and the others cried out in alarm. Xiang Zhanxiong desperately flew towards Xiang Nan, but was stopped by Wang Changhe and Kai Baohua again. Xiang Zhanxiong angrily poured blood into his pupils, wishing he could eat the 2 old bastards in front of him in one bite. Is it finally over? The audience had lost their ability to express themselves, and they were all dumbfounded as they spoke emotionlessly. Xiang Nan had used his strength to prove himself, but now, he was like a flash in the pan, blooming beautifully and withering away. A peerless bluestone genius was about to die. Just as Wang Xiaoyun's sword was about to pierce through the space between Xiang Nan's eyebrows, a shadow suddenly flashed in the sky. In less than a flash, the shadow suddenly appeared beside Xiang Nan. This figure grabbed Wang Xiaoyun's sword with his right hand and pressed his left hand on Xiang Nan's head. A gentle, spring breeze-like force slowly penetrated Xiang Nan's head and entered the 100 bones around him. It actually suppressed the speed at which Xiang Nan's body was being destroyed. This person was dressed in a simple linen robe, and his long black hair fell down. He was surprisingly a man in his early 20s. Chapter 109 Dawn. Who is it? Wang Xiaoyun was shocked, but he was furious and couldn't care less. He wanted to pull out his sword from the mysterious man's hand, and even wanted to attack him. The man in the linen robe smiled faintly and did not exert any strength on his hand. However, Wang Xiaoyun desperately wanted to pull back his sword, but the sword did not move at all. It was as if this sword had pierced into a solid rock, and no matter how hard it tried, it could no longer be pulled out. Wang Xiaoyun gritted his teeth and decided to let go of his sword and smash the man in the linen robe with his fist. However, the man in the linen robe smiled faintly. A soft yuan qi flowed out from his hand, sticking the sword to Wang Xiaoyun, who was holding the hilt of the sword. Wang Xiaoyun's face revealed a look of shock. He wanted to let go, but he couldn't let go no matter what. That sword could not be pulled back, nor could song. The spectators were shocked again. Who exactly was that mysterious person? He actually held Wang Xiaoyun tightly without a single move. Wang Xiaoyun was stunned. You are. Let go of my son. In the distance, Wang Changhe, who was at the first Tianyuan layer, could no longer watch. He turned around and rushed towards Wang Xiaoyun, leaving only Kai Baohua to temporarily restrain Xiang Zhanxiong. Wang Changhe slashed out from afar. This slash turned dark red and flowed with a dense poisonous liquid. It shot towards the man in linen. The smile on the man's face disappeared, but he stretched out his right hand and casually grabbed the fierce dark red sword light. He only used 2 fingers. He grabbed the sword light. The sword light buzzed between the man's fingers, constantly struggling to move forward. However, no matter how much sparks the sword light created on the man's finger swords, or even the sound of metal rubbing, it was still unable to move forward at all. The crux of the matter was the poison contained within the sword light. Once it touched the man's skin, it turned into black smoke and evaporated. Not to mention Wang Xiaoyun and his son, even City Lord Hongzhen and the messengers of the 5 great sects were stunned by this scene. Wang Changhe was an expert at the first level of the heavenly Yuan realm. His sword radiance was actually unable to even break free from his fingers. Most importantly, none of the people present could see through the mysterious man's martial arts realm. On the other hand, Xiang Nan's pale face slowly turned red. Although the large area of the vaporized body had not been repaired, the signs of continued destruction had completely stopped. The gentle power of the man wrapped around Xiang Nan's arm bones and said with a gentle smile, "Xiang Nan, don't move." Xiang Nan struggled to stand up, but before the man could speak, he bowed to the man. "Thank you for saving me." This was the difference between Xiang Nan and the others. If it was someone else, most of them would clamor to kill Wang Xiaoyun when they saw the mysterious person helping them. However, Xiang Nan did not. The first thing he said was to be grateful. Because he had tasted the feeling of betrayal, he knew how to cherish the kindness of others. "Who on earth are you?" Although Wang Xiaoyun was afraid in his heart, he still held on to his face and shouted, "You dare to stop me? Do you know who I am? I am the core disciple of the Blazing Fire sect, Wang Xiaoyun. Are you trying to make an enemy of my Blazing Fire sect?" Hearing this, 3 words appeared in the hearts of all the spectators: shameless. When you, Wang Xiaoyun, were able to beat Xiang Nan, you would jump up and down and yell. If you couldn't beat the mysterious man, you would immediately move out of your sect. This kind of behavior, could it be considered a man? Do you have any more dignity as a man? Blazing Fire sect. The mysterious man smiled faintly. "I really don't dare to offend you. However, if you want to know who I am, I will tell you." As he spoke, the mysterious man flipped his right hand and a wooden waist plate appeared in his palm. The waist token looked simple and old, but it carried a heavy feeling of 1,000 years of sedimentation. There was only one pattern on the waist token. It was a small red sun at the center of the token. The moment he saw the waist token, Wang Xiaoyun's face instantly turned pale. His legs softened and he almost knelt on the ground in fear. The mysterious man smiled and said, "I am Jiang Yunfan, the 22nd generation disciple of the Haran sect." Haran sect. The Wang clan and the Kai clan felt their brains buzzing and almost fainted. The entire place was silent. It was as if after this man arrived, even the entire black sharp demonic beasts had quieted down. Ever since the selection of Martial Arts City, the miracles and shocks that Xiang Nan had brought were enough to make everyone's minds waver. Right now, even the people of the Nature sect had appeared. Could it be that this year's Martial Arts City election was favored by the heavens? City Lord Hongzhen was the first to charge down and stood in front of Jiang Yunfan. He cupped his fists and said, "Welcome to the friends of the Nature sect." Although City Lord Hongzhen pretended to be calm on the surface, he felt as if his heart was in turmoil. That was the Haran sect. Throughout the entire Blue Tide continent, there was only one first-rate sect, the Haran sect. It could be said to be the apple of the Blue Tide continent's eye. Xiang Nan, who was once the #1 genius of the Profound Sky sect, naturally recognized the waist token of the Haran sect. This kind of waist token was simply impossible to imitate. It was absolutely true of the Haran sect. Immediately after, Jiang Yunfan tossed out another explosive piece of news. Jiang Yunfan smiled at Xiang Nan and said, "The only thing I have to announce is that Xiang Nan will be the 23rd generation disciple of our Haran sect from today onwards." After hearing this, Wang Xiaoyun's body finally shook and he sat down on the ground dejectedly. It's over, this time it's really over. In terms of talent, Wang Xiaoyun was inferior to Xiang Nan. In terms of strength, Wang Xiaoyun did not get any benefits from Xiang Nan. Even in terms of background, Wang Xiaoyun was inferior to Xiang Nan. Blazing Fire sect. Second-rate sects. It was a joke in front of the Haran sect. Haran sect was a first-class sect. There were only 8 first-class sects in the world. Until now, no one was able to regain their senses, because what was happening now was too sudden, and it had already exceeded everyone's tolerance. However, no matter what, Xiang Nan was already a disciple of the Haran sect. This was definitely not as simple as the Everbright sect's lintel. It was simply an ancestral grave emitting green smoke. At the same time, everyone was truly happy for Xiang Nan. This 16-year-old child had managed to break through one knife at a time and finally managed to break through. Chapter 110 Backer. At this moment, all the Xiang family members were so excited that they almost burst into tears. Finally, he turned around. City Lord Hongzhen is so impulsive that he wants to kneel down to the heavens. In our Bluestone City, there is finally someone who can rise to prominence. For thousands of years, in the history of our Bluestone City, you can write down the 3 words, Haran sect. Looking at the Wang clan, their faces were as ashes. But the fear on their faces was greater than shock. Xiang Nan became a disciple of the Haran sect. Then, does the Wang clan still have a foothold? Who were even more excited were the Mo clan and the Li clan. They secretly rejoiced that they had not participated in this operation against the Xiang clan. Who would have thought that Xiang Nan would ascend to the heavens in one step and directly enter the strongest Haran sect in the entire Blue Tide continent? Senior brother Jiang, Xiang Nan wanted to express his gratitude, but before he could finish his sentence, blood spilled out of his mouth and his body began to tremble. The collapse of Xiang Nan's controlled body had actually begun again. "Don't move." Jiang Yunfan's expression changed as he said seriously, "Your body is in a terrible condition. Don't use the weather for the time being." As he spoke, Jiang Yunfan jumped up behind Xiang Nan and sat down cross-legged, placing his palms on Xiang Nan's back. A gentle, sunny energy slowly entered Xiang Nan's body. At this moment, Xiang Nan's collapsed body stopped again. Xiao Nan. Xiang Zhanxiong and Xiang Xiaohua had already rushed over anxiously. That Xiang Xiaohua anxiously said, "What's wrong with my son Xiang Nan?" Jiang Yunfan continued to absorb the mysterious energy for Xiang Nan. He frowned and said, "Xiang Nan's body is in a very strange state. His body is like a burnt leaf. Although it still retains the shape of a leaf, once touched, it will collapse into ashes." Hearing this, Xiang Zhanxiong and Xiang Xiaohua were shocked. Jiang Yunfan said, "Xiang Nan, I am using the Haotian Chun Yuan technique of the nature's vast sect to repair your injuries. However, this technique can only be used when you cultivate it yourself. Right now, I can only use external force to stimulate your body and allow your body to repair itself. Haotian Chun Yuan technique." The messengers of the 5 sects, including Wang Xiaoyun, all had astonished expressions on their faces. This Haotian Chun Yuan technique was one of the symbolic techniques of the Haran sect. It was a secret manual that countless people dreamed of. Wang Changhe's face turned pale from fear. He whispered in Wang Xiaoyun's ear, "This is a good opportunity. Let's get rid of Jiang Yunfan and Xiang Nan together. Otherwise, once the 2 of them are free, our Wang clan will be annihilated." Wang Xiaoyun's body trembled. He felt the heart-wrenching pain coming from his broken arm, and killing intent quickly flashed in his eyes. However, did he really dare to attack the Haran sect disciples? If he didn't make a move now, would he still be able to eat the good fruits of the Wang clan in the future? Wang Xiaoyun's expression darkened, but he still didn't dare to make a move. He cupped his fists at Jiang Yunfan and said, "Senior brother Yunfan, I am the core disciple of the Blazing Fire sect, Wang Xiaoyun." Jiang Yunfan raised his eyelids and looked at Wang Xiaoyun without saying anything. Wang Xiaoyun gritted his teeth and said forcefully, "There is a personal grudge between our Wang clan and the Xiang clan. Even if we surrounded the Xiang clan just now, we did not use the power of the Blazing Fire sect. The other martial brothers of our Blazing Fire sect are just watching from the sidelines. So now that Xiang Nan has entered the Haran sect, your Haran sect cannot interfere in this matter. I wonder if what I said is correct." Although Wang Xiaoyun was a vicious villain, his brain was not stupid. He could still think of this section at this critical moment. Jiang Yunfan still didn't answer Wang Xiaoyun's question. Instead, he took out a dark green pill and stuffed it into Xiang Nan's mouth. This is a pill specially made by our Haran sect. With the stimulation of my Haotian Chun Yuan technique, your body should slowly recover, he said. Hao Yuan rejuvenation pill was a kind of rejuvenation pill. It was an improved version of the rejuvenation pill. It belonged to the Haran sect. Apart from the Haran sect, other sects, large and small, also had their own secret pill formulas. Those were not available on the market. At this time, Jiang Yunfan only glanced at Wang Xiaoyun, but he still didn't speak to him. This made Wang Xiaoyun feel extremely embarrassed. However, he didn't dare to shout at Jiang Yunfan, so he could only endure. Yunfan Jiang said to Xiang Nan, "Junior brother Xiang Nan, how do you plan to settle this matter? Do you need senior brother's help?" Upon hearing Jiang Yunfan's words, the Wang clan was in a state of panic. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes and said, "Thank you, senior brother Yunfan, for your kindness. However, I will use my own fist to retrieve the Xiang clan's venue." "All right." Jiang Yunfan expressed his admiration and said, "It's not bad that he is someone I like. He has courage. He would use his own strength to settle his personal grudges. This was the best man in the world." Jiang Yunfan continued, "However, your current cultivation level is still too low. Senior brother, in disguise, will do you a small favor." At this point, Jiang Yunfan finally looked at Wang Xiaoyun and said, "Wang Xiaoyun, you don't have to provoke me. If you didn't borrow the might of Chihua's sect, why wouldn't the other 5 sects accept Xiang Nan?" Wang Xiaoyun was speechless. He felt a burning pain on his face. Because of this, all the spectators present had witnessed it with their own eyes and were unable to refute it. Jiang Yunfan added, "However, the other disciples of the Blazing Fire sect did not help you kill. How about this? Your Wang clan cannot move out of Blackstone City within 2 years. If 2 years later, Xiang Nan still doesn't have the ability to do anything to your Wang clan, then your Wang clan will go wherever they want, and my Haran sect will no longer care." Hearing this, Wang Xiaoyun finally heaved a sigh of relief. 2 years. Within 2 years, will Xiang Nan be able to catch up with me? It was a joke. "Thank you, senior brother." Xiang Nan was extremely grateful in his heart. He was truly afraid that the Wang clan would run away. In the future, even if he wanted to take revenge, he would not be able to find anyone. In the future, you're all one of us. There's no need to be so courteous. Alright, your injuries have stabilized. Get up. Jiang Yunfan withdrew his Haotian Chun Yuan technique and pulled Xiang Nan. At this moment, everyone noticed that Xiang Nan's arms had been repaired. Although it looked very shabby, at least it had flesh and blood. This kind of recovery speed was simply too heaven-defying. That Hao Yuan rejuvenation pill was truly no small matter compared to the Haotian Chunyuan technique. Let's go. After Wang Xiaoyun received the promise he wanted, he immediately fled the scene with the Wang family. As soon as a dignified Haran sect disciple arrived, would there be any room for the Blazing Fire sect to speak? Wang Xiaoyun could only humiliate himself if he continued to stay. Seeing this scene, the spectators from the other towns all spontaneously applauded. Perhaps some people had disliked Xiang Nan before, or perhaps some people were secretly hostile to him, but Xiang Nan had used his strength to win everyone's respect in this martial arts city election. He traveled alone through the insurmountable 300 origin return path, and even defeated all the city elect experts on his own. Xiang Nan's unyielding spirit made everyone who saw this match feel sincere admiration. Chapter 111. Everyone is happy. Ha ha ha, good. Good. Everyone is happy. City Lord Hongjun smiled from ear to ear. Xiang Nan, whom he valued the most, had finally received a fair treatment. Talents shouldn't be buried like this. Brother Jiang. City Lord Hongjun said to Jiang Yunfan, I think Xiang Nan's injuries won't fully recover in a day or two. It's not appropriate to hurry. You should stay at the Xiang clan for a few days first. How about leaving after Xiang Nan's injuries stabilize? Jiang Yunfan thought for a moment and nodded. City Lord Hongjun's words are true. Then let's settle it. What do you mean, Xiang Nan? Xiang Nan sighed in his heart for the rest of his life. He nodded and said, follow senior brother's orders. At this point, Xiang Nan turned to look at the 5 third-grade sects. The messengers of the 5 third-grade sects all felt their faces burning, so they hurriedly turned around and dodged, not daring to look at Xiang Nan. Only Elder Yu had a guilty look on her face and bit her lips without saying anything. Xiang Nan walked up to Elder Yu and said respectfully, Elder Yu, today is the big day for the Xiang clan. You accompany our friends from the other 4 sects and come stay with us for a few days. I, Xiang Nan, can also entertain you. Cough cough, this is good, even, cough, it's fine. The sect envoys all felt their faces darkened, but they didn't want to miss this opportunity, so they could only shamelessly agree. Also, Mo Hai and Qing Chuan, you guys can come with us. Xiang Nan said to Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan. The two exchanged glances and sighed. Mo Hai cupped his fists at Xiang Nan and said, Brother Xiang Nan, I, Mo Hai, am truly convinced this time. Since you are willing to treat us as friends, then you, Xiang Nan, are also our friends. Since that's the case, then let's go. Jiang Yunfan smiled. With a wave of his right hand, Xiang Nan's black saber flew over. At this moment, Xiang Nan suddenly remembered that the lightning talisman was still being suppressed by the black saber. Damn it! In that case, wouldn't the lightning talisman be discovered by senior brother Jiang Yunfan? However, what happened surprised Xiang Nan. Jiang Yunfan only held the black saber in his hand, and the lightning talisman was stuffed into Xiang Nan's belt at an invisible speed. Let's talk about the lightning meridian's talent slowly in the future. Junior brother Xiang Nan, there's no need to worry. Jiang Yunfan's words entered Xiang Nan's ears. Presumably, Jiang Yunfan knew very well that the lightning meridian's talent was not something that could be easily exposed, so he helped Xiang Nan cover it up thoroughly. So senior apprentice brother can already tell. Xiang Nan felt relieved. Since the other party had discovered it, he didn't have to hide it anymore and directly admitted it. Afterwards, Xiang Nan introduced his grandfather, uncle, elder and parents to Jiang Yunfan. Only then did the group leave Black Sharp Demon Forest. A fierce martial arts city selection officially ended. On the flying ship, Jiang Yunfan curiously grabbed a small bird leg of the Gale Sparrow and asked curiously, this bird is actually holding my storage ring. Xiang Nan rubbed his temples awkwardly and said, this is hard to say. Little Bird actually went to steal Jiang Yunfan's storage ring and was caught in the act. Xiang Nan felt that he was really embarrassed today. On this day, the Xiang Manor gave a big banquet in honor of all the guests from the 6 towns of Blackstone City. For a time, the Xiang Manor was bustling with people. Although the Xiang Manor was not small, it could not take up so many people. The entire manor was filled with tables. Many people who rushed over to congratulate him did not even have their own tables or chairs. They were just standing outside the Xiang Manor with wine bowls on their hands and smiles on their faces. Everyone was admired and wanted to see how glorious the people of the Haoran sect were. Normally, the disciples of the Haran sect would not be able to see them just by wanting to see them. Not to mention the city lord of Bluestone City, even the prefecture lord of Wulong Prefecture would not be able to easily invite the people of the Haran sect. However, the Haran sect treated their disciples extremely well. Since they had already accepted Xiang Nan, they were generous enough to welcome the guests with Xiang Nan in the Xiang manner. Xiang Nan was very grateful for this action of lowering his body. Jiang Yunfan leapt into the air with his wine bowl and smiled at the guests inside and outside the mansion. Everyone, from now on, Xiang Nan will be the 26th generation disciple of our Haran sect. I hope everyone can help the Xiang clan more. Naturally. All the large and small clans of Blue Rock City had arrived. Everyone hurriedly raised their glasses in fear and agreed. Xiang Nan, tell me a few words. Jiang Yunfan pulled Xiang Nan into the air with his yuan qi. Xiang Nan raised his glass to the guests and said, "Everyone, my Xiang family has experienced great ups and downs. To be honest, this journey has not been easy." Everyone knew what had happened to the Xiang clan. Hearing that Xiang Nan had told them about the Xiang clan's difficulties, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Xiang Nan sighed in his heart. In his previous life, he was one of the 8 great sections. He was a disciple of the Heavenly Profound sect. Unexpectedly, he had entered the Hao Ran sect of the 8 great sects in his current life. Perhaps this was good fortune playing tricks on others. Xiang Nan smiled and shook his head. He drank a mouthful of the strong liquor in the bowl and said in a loud voice, "I don't know how to say such emotional words. Anyway, thanks to everyone's care, after drinking this glass of liquor, we will all be friends in the future." Everyone present gave a thumbs up. They all drank with Xiang Nan. To tell the truth, apart from the city lord and Wampo Arian, no one had ever taken care of the Xiang clan. However, at this moment, Xiang Nan had transformed into a dragon and his identity was greatly different. To be able to say these words was truly convincing to everyone. What a hot-blooded man! City Lord Hongzhen was the happiest today, and his laughter shook the heavens and earth. Everyone in the Xiang clan was also very happy for Xiang Nan, especially the elders. Their eyes were filled with gratification. Our Xiao Nan has grown up. Xiang Xiaohua and his wife shook hands, their eyes slightly moist. Hongzhen City Lord added, "There is one thing I want to ask you, Brother Jiang. When did you arrive at Bluestone City?" This was also a common question in everyone's hearts. Why did Jiang Yunfan suddenly appear? Jiang Yunfan smiled faintly, "Our Haran sect has always been here." This simple sentence left everyone stunned. They couldn't help but be shocked and they thought about the reason behind it. The Haran sect never recruited disciples on the surface, but they had always been observing in secret. It could be said that there were messengers from the Haran sect in every corner of the Blue Tide continent. Only when the messengers of the Haran sect truly took a fancy to a person would they appear. Otherwise, they would come and go silently. No one knew that he had been here before. If Xiang Nan hadn't performed too well in the martial arts city selection, Jiang Yunfan would have left after observing for a while. In other words, everyone who participated in the selection of martial arts city actually had a chance to enter the nature sect. Chapter 112 Reluctantly Parting. It can be said that everyone has an opportunity. The key is to see if you have the strength to be chosen by the nature sect. This wine was really dark. The Xiang clan had finally changed their appearance and stood up again. Furthermore, it was even higher than the previous time. After the banquet was over, everyone returned with great pleasure. It was night, and Xiang Nan found it difficult to fall asleep. He stood alone in his small courtyard and sighed while looking at the moon. At the side, the wall buildings destroyed by Wang Xiaoyun hadn't been completely repaired. Now that he saw those broken bricks and tiles, it was as if he could remember them from yesterday. After Xiang Nan's rebirth, he had experienced great ups and downs in a few short months. He had lingered on the line of life and death several times. It could be said that his experiences over the past few months were even more tortuous and colorful than all the experiences in his previous life combined. In this life, Xiang Nan had seen the coldness and warmth of the world, and his temperament had also changed. Can't sleep. At some unknown time, Jiang Yunfan stood quietly behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan did not turn around, only smiled. Jiang Yunfan took a few steps forward and stood side by side with Xiang Nan. He said, "Although you have entered the nature sect, you can't relax. The responsibility on your body is still a long and arduous one. I've seen Wang Xiaoyun's talent before. Although this kid has a vicious heart, there's no denying that he is truly a genius. 2 years from now, his realm will definitely surpass his father, Wang Changhe, and he might even become an expert at the second and third heavenly Yuan realm." Jiang Yunfan looked at Xiang Nan seriously and said, "In 2 years, it will be very, very difficult for you to leap from the 9th level of the Xiantian realm to the Tian Yuan realm. 2 years later, the Xiang clan will still face destruction. At that time, Wang Xiaoyun will do everything he can to kill you. It's impossible for him to leave you behind as a future trouble." "I know." Xiang Nan nodded. Wang Xiaoyun had already burned his boat. The next time, even with the help of the Haoran sect, he would not be able to stop Wang Xiaoyun's killing intent. After all, there was an agreement between the two sides. Senior brother doesn't doubt your talent, nor does he underestimate you. Yunfan Jiang stared at Xiang Nan seriously and said, "But there are some things that I, as your senior brother, still want to tell you. Don't think that you can rest easy just because you have exceptional talent. Under the heavens, there are more than 10 million martial arts geniuses, but how many people can really live to the end? Geniuses?" Jiang Yunfan put his hands behind his back and looked up at the starry sky. Even by Mukin, the number 1 genius under the starry sky, is stronger. So what? Haven't an unknown person died? Xiang Nan's heart shook. Yes. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, talent is definitely not the capital of a martial artist. Jiang Yunfan's words were really good words. Xiang Nan had used his previous life to prove Jiang Yunfan's correctness. Yunfan Jiang smiled and patted Xiang Nan on the shoulder. "However, I am very happy to have you, a Lightning Meridian's talent disciple. In the past 2 years, the Profound Sky sect has grown more and more powerful. It is almost impossible to suppress it. Although our Haoran sect is also one of the 8 great sects, it is still unable to raise its head in front of the Profound Sky sect." Xiang Nan smiled bitterly. He knew that the overall strength of the Profound Sky sect was indeed greater than that of the Haoran sect. Jiang Yunfan smiled bitterly and said, "The disciples of the 8 great sects have always been competing in secret. Unfortunately, Bai Mukin pushed the Profound Sky sect to an unparalleled height by himself. Among the younger generation of disciples of the sect, no one can look at the back of the heavenly Profound sect's necklace. Originally, I thought that Bai Mukin had perished. We first-rate sects have finally had a chance to catch up with the Profound Sky sect. However, the Profound Sky sect has produced another Profound Green Bamboo. This woman's talent is even stronger than Bai Mukin's. It's simply the heavenly blessing Profound sect." When Jiang Yunfan said those words, his tone was filled with a sense of powerlessness. At this point, a hatred rose in Xiang Nan's heart. Xian Qingzhu's talent was originally outstanding amongst her peers. After absorbing Bai Mukin's 5 heavenly spiritual meridians, she was truly even more terrifying than Bai Mukin back then. However, Xiang Nan became even more determined in his heart. He thought to himself, back then, I was able to push the disciples of the heavenly profound sect to the peak with one hand. In this life, I was also able to let the Haran sect surpass the heavenly profound sect by one head. Alright, it's getting late. Rest. Jiang Yunfan handed Xiang Nan another Haoyuan rejuvenation pill and said, follow me to the Haran sect to report in 3 days. Prepare well for the next 3 days. Xiang Nan thanked Jiang Yunfan and the two separated. In the past 3 days, Xiang Nan was no longer in a hurry to cultivate. If he wanted to defeat Wang Xiaoyun, he would not be lacking for a moment. He spent 2 days reuniting with his family and enjoying the joy of family that he had never enjoyed in his previous life. On the last day, he went to the city lord's mansion sincerely to pay a visit to Hong Zhen, the great benefactor who had always taken care of him. On the 4th day, Xiang Nan finally followed his senior brother, Jiang Yunfan, on his way to school. Everyone from the Xiang clan, including city lord Hong Zhen, came to bid farewell. After arriving 10 li away from the pavilion, everyone stopped in their tracks. After Xiang Nan continued to walk for a while, he suddenly turned around and stabbed his saber into the ground. Then, he knelt down and bowed to his family. Xiang Nan knelt down and clasped his fists. Xiang Nan, the descendant of the Xiang clan, kowtowed to the elders. Once I go to the Haran sect, I will definitely learn something. In 2 years' time, I will definitely be able to defeat an enemy surnamed Wang. Xiang Nan swore an oath with his saber. At the same time, Xiang Nan also made an agreement in his heart. Heavenly profound sect, your good days will not last long. Xian Qingzhu, how much did you take from me? I, Xiang Nan, will double my reward. Grandfather, parents, this child has gone. After saying that, Xiang Nan and his clansmen shed tears. After the setting sun lengthened Xiang Nan's back and dyed his future red, Xiang Nan realized that the most difficult thing to part with in the world was not martial arts, but kindness. With dreams and hatred in his heart, Xiang Nan embarked on his journey. With a whistle, a flying demonic beast descended from the sky. Xiang Nan and Jiang Yunfan stepped onto the back of the demonic beast and headed towards the setting sun. The Haran sect, the only first-class sect in the Blue Tide continent, possessed an extraordinary status. The Blue Tide continent was divided into 5 countries. The Haotian Empire was the largest of them. The Azure Tide sect was located in one of the most prosperous areas of the Haotian Empire, Donghai Province and Haotian City. From Wulong Prefecture to Donghai Province, it was 500,000 kilometers away. One was at the southwest border, and the other was at the east coast. After arriving in East China Sea Province, Xiang Nan finally understood what prosperity was. After arriving at Haotian City, he finally understood what it meant to be vast and majestic. In fact, Zhanglan continent was more commercialized. It was famous for its prosperity, while the 9 Firmaments continent where the Profound Sky sect was located was a sacred land of martial arts. In terms of prosperity, the Blue Water continent was still far ahead of the 9 Firmaments continent, but in terms of martial arts status, it was inferior to the 9 Firmaments continent. Chapter 113 How Ran 6 Peaks. Haotian City was incomparably huge, and its scale was only vast, far exceeding Xiang Nan's expectations. As Xiang Nan and Jiang Yunfan walked in Haotian City, Xiang Nan's eyes almost never stopped. He kept looking around, his eyes filled with admiration. The grandiose buildings were so strong that they pierced through the clouds. Those tall and frightening buildings, however, were mostly built with an ancient flavor, and their entire body was built with several high-strength timbers that were famous all over the world. At a glance, it didn't lose its unique feeling because of the enormity of those buildings. Instead, it gave people a kind of magnificent and special charm that emitted an ancient fragrance. Especially on the eaves of those huge buildings, there were sparkling and translucent wind bells hanging. Under the sunlight, the wind was colorful. The wind bells rang like birds singing in the jungle. In the macroscopic past, Haotian City did not look like an ice-cold city made of steel, but more like a peaceful green jungle. It was simply seizing the good fortune of the heavens. The precipitation of history and the foundation of culture were vividly embodied in Haotian City. Jiang Yunfan smiled and said, "The architectural style of Haotian City has not changed for 1,000 years. Listen to that pleasant wind bell. This city is also known as the City of Style. It's really beautiful." Even though Xiang Nan was knowledgeable, he was still shocked by Haotian City. The only flaw was that the pedestrians on the streets had a high status in Haotian City, causing the people in the city to be even more tainted with Philistine aura. Regardless of whether it was high-ranking officials or ordinary people, everyone's faces carried a kind of arrogance hidden deep within their bones. Galloping past, gorgeous and horrifying carriages, each inlaid with golden jade, dazzling and dazzling. Everyone thought they were superior, and even when they saw Xiang Nan's rustic attire, they did not hide their disdain. This caused Xiang Nan to feel that the scenery was truly terrible, and Jiang Yunfan felt helpless towards this. Then, an even more shocking scene appeared. Haoran sect was located in the middle of Haotian City. That's right, it was a group of mountains. The mountains were actually surrounded by the city. When the two of them stood outside the mountains in front of a giant mountain gate, Jiang Yunfan smiled and said, "This is our Haoran sect." The huge mountain gate was cyan green, and at the top, there were two large characters written on it, "Dragon and Snake, vigorous and powerful, Haoran." The mountains were isolated, and the mountainside was already covered in clouds. From afar, the green mountains were lush and surrounded by immortal clouds. It was truly beautiful. Senior Brother Yunfan. Outside the mountain gate was the bustling city, and on both sides of the mountain gate stood the disciples guarding the gate. The two disciples were clearly familiar with Jiang Yunfan and greeted him respectfully. It wasn't hard to see that Jiang Yunfan had a high status amongst the disciples of the Nature's Nature sect. After Jiang Yunfan brought Xiang Nan into the mountain gate, the mountains were right in front of him. As they walked, Jiang Yunfan introduced Xiang Nan. There were a total of 6 green mountains in the Haoran sect. The main peak was called the Haoran Peak, and the Haoran Palace was built on top of it. It was the cultivation ground and residence of the Haoran sect master and the Haoran Palace elders. The other 5 secluded peaks were, the Qi sect's Shenyang Peak, Sword sect's Xianyang Peak, Dongyang Peak of Saber sect, Pil Zhaohua Peak, and the Last Sun Peak. The two of them walked along the way and greeted Jiang Yunfan respectfully from time to time when they met young sect disciples. Xiang Nan digested Jiang Yunfan's introduction and muttered, "I can understand the Qi sect, the Sword sect, the Saber sect, and the Pill tools, but what is Sun Peak?" The so-called Qi sect was mainly focused on Qi condensation. This type of martial artist usually had extraordinarily powerful Yuan Qi, but their flexibility and physical strength were far from enough. The Sword sect was only a symbolic name. Although most of the disciples of the Sword sect used swords, the style represented by the Sword sect itself was flexible and changeable. It mainly relied on battle techniques, and did not require all of the disciples to use swords. Similarly, the saber sect had the most disciples using sabers. However, the saber sect itself represented a strong and fierce style, dominated by tyrannical power. Pill artifacts were easier to understand. Not all of the disciples who came to the nature sect were martial arts geniuses. Many of them possessed powerful pill refining or artifact forging potential. This type of non-combat martial artist was more suitable for the Zhaohua Peak where the pill artifacts were located. Xiang Nan had memories of his previous life, so he naturally understood these basic sect structures very well. However, there was only one Sun Peak that Jiang Yunfan did not elaborate on. Sigh, it's a long story. Jiang Yunfan let out a long sigh when he heard Xiang Nan ask about Taiyang Feng. Afterwards, Yunfan Chang told Xiang Nan about the history of the Haoran sect. The Haoran sect was founded more than 1,500 years ago by 5 brothers who had experienced life and death together. They were known as the 5 ancestors of the Haoran sect. These 5 people were friends of life and death, not true brothers. Among them, the eldest became the first generation of Haoran sect master, while the second to 5th eldest created the Zhengyang, Xiangyang, Dongyang, and Taiyang sects because of their different martial arts styles. Nowadays, the Haoran sect had gone through a lot of hardships. With the fall of the first generation of sect masters, the second generation of sect advocated Haoran taking over the sect. That Zhang Haoran was named the Heavenly Dao Marquis by the Haotian Empire's Grand Emperor Haotian. Outsiders called him the Heavenly Dao Old Master. The peak lords of the 4 peaks had already reached the 3rd generation, but the 3rd generation peak lord of Sun Peak was a genius that even Zhang Haoran admired. It was said that there was no martial technique in this world that Peak Master Sun could not comprehend. Unfortunately, Peak Master Sun was too obsessed with innovation and created a martial technique that violated martial arts. It was called the Sun God Technique. Sun God Technique. Xiang Nan was stunned when he heard this. Why did the name of this cultivation technique sound so exaggerated? Jiang Yunfan smiled bitterly and said, "It is said that this Sun God technique is designed to absorb the power of the sun for one's own use and can display unparalleled power. But what is even more regrettable is that even the 3rd generation Sun Peak Master did not succeed in cultivating it himself, and even died from it." Xiang Nan rubbed his temples and thought to himself, "It's strange that those 3 generations of Sun Peak Masters killed him by practicing martial arts." Jiang Yunfan continued, "At present, the only Peak Master of the Sun Peak is the 4th generation. Her name is Su Kaiyu. She is the only daughter of the 3rd generation of Peak Master of the Sun Peak." Su Kaiyu firmly believed that her father hadn't done anything wrong, and firmly believed that the Sun God technique could be cultivated. Therefore, she stubbornly chose to continue cultivating and perfecting the Sun God technique. Regardless of how the elders of Haoran Palace tried to persuade her, Su Kaiyu refused to listen to them. Jiang Yunfan said as he sighed, "That Sun God technique has practiced a peak master of the half-sage realm to death. Do you think any other disciple would dare to enter the Sun Peak?" As a result, the other 4 peaks of the Haoran sect are flourishing with disciples. Only the Sun Peak is a sect disciple. Chapter 114 Newly Promoted Disciples. Afterwards, Jiang Yunfan told Xiang Nan all the details of the Haoran sect. It turned out that the disciples who joined the nature sect had to choose a secluded peak to join the sect. Take the Zhengyang peak of the Qi sect as an example. After a disciple joined the Zhengyang peak, the Zhengyang peak master would be the disciple's master. However, the Zhengyang peak master would not guide the disciple one move at a time. He would only be responsible for teaching the disciple the corresponding Qigong techniques or answering the disciple's martial arts questions. The place where disciples really wanted to learn martial arts knowledge was actually the Haran Academy below the 6 peaks. There were special tutors there who would teach disciples martial arts knowledge and theories, as well as combat techniques. The cultivation method of Xinjiang Peaks faction is rank 3 Dipper Qi. This is the only type of Qi cultivation technique that can advance. After a disciple cultivates, his Yuan Qi will be far beyond ordinary people. However, what comes with it is the weakening of his physical strength. This is the purest Qi cultivation technique and does not have body refinement functions. The sword sect's Xiangyang Peaks faction technique was Xiantian Astral Qi. This technique was the most agile of the 3 sects, both in terms of speed of release and smoothness of operation. The Saber sect's Dongyang Peaks faction technique was Primordial Dipper Qi. This technique was strong and domineering, but when used, it was slower than Xiantian Dipper Qi, but its power surpassed Xiantian Dipper Qi. The cultivation methods of the Sword sect and the Saber sect were supplemented with the effects of Qi condensation and body refinement, and they were called Qi dual cultivation. It could be said that these 3 techniques had their own advantages and disadvantages. The Qi sect had the strongest lethality, the Sword sect had better techniques, and the Saber sect had a strong physique. However, the cultivation methods of these 3 sects were only the purest cultivation methods, and they did not have any martial skills attached to them. The Haran sect gathered all kinds of powerful martial skills in the world. These martial skills were hidden in the war god palace of the Haran sect, where they could be learned. As for the Sun Peak, what kind of style of cultivation technique was the Sun God technique? This was unknown, because Jiang Yunfan was a disciple of the Sword sect. So it's like this. Xiang Nan nodded thoughtfully. What he wanted the most when he came to the Haran sect was a formula to increase his resistance to electricity. The martial skills of the Nature sect were all hidden in the War God Temple, while the other mysterious historical manuals, pill formulas, and artifact forging manuals were hidden in the Heavenly Secrets Temple. As the 2 chatted, they stepped onto the main peak, the Nature Peak. Coincidentally, Xiang Nan came. Today was the day when the 23rd generation disciples of the Haran sect entered the sect. The 2 of them circled up the mountain path. Clouds and mist wrapped around the sky, and strange birds kept appearing. It could be said that they were in an immortal realm. When they reached the peak of Haran Peak, they saw that the peak of Haran Peak had been peeled off, leaving behind an open and flat space. On the open space, there was a vast expanse of endless wooden palace buildings. In this palace, there were already a large number of newly promoted disciples waiting. Many disciples were chatting non-stop with novelty and excitement in their hearts. Xiang Nan raised his head again. In the air several hundred feet above the palaces, there was a floating palace. The mysterious palace was hidden in the clouds, revealing only a corner. Jiang Yunfan introduced, the mysterious palace in the sky is the most important place of our Nature's vast sect. The Nature's vast sect is the retreat of the sect master, his old man, and elders. Xiang Nan thought to himself. The other secluded peaks were filled with spiritual qi. The density of spiritual qi in the heavens and earth was more than 100 times that in the outside world. Only this nature peak was unable to sense even the slightest bit of spiritual qi. It seemed that the spiritual energy of the entire main peak had been channeled into the mysterious and unfathomable nature palace. At this moment, a distant ancient bell slowly rang. Many young disciples immediately respectfully tidied their clothes and entered the first palace hall of the wooden palace group. Jiang Yunfan patted Xiang Nan on the shoulder and said, "Remember, there are countless geniuses here. You must be kind to others and have a good relationship with your fellow disciples. Also, according to my judgment of you, I recommend you to join the Dongyang Peak of the Saber sect. Of course, this is only my personal opinion. Alright, let's go in. In the lobby, there were hundreds of praying moles. The young disciples sat down as they pleased, and in the center of the hall, there were 5 praying moles in a row. At this moment, the disciples were quietly chatting with each other. Some people were excitedly wondering if they would be lucky enough to meet the famous heavenly Tao old man Zhang Haran today. More disciples scoffed. The heavenly Tao old man had already reached the transformation realm, and his cultivation was so high that it was impossible to guess. He wanted to see the divine dragon without seeing the head. Only a handful of people had truly seen him before. As the disciples were chatting excitedly, Xiang Nan suddenly felt that there were 5 more people in the corner of his eyes. The 5 of them were sitting on the 5 prayer mats in front of them. This scene caused Xiang Nan's expression to become serious. The 5 prayers were still empty one moment ago, but there were already people in the next moment. When the other disciples saw this scene, the scene instantly became completely silent. With his toes, he knew that these 5 people must be the world-famous 5 peak masters of the Haran sect. The first person on his left hand was a dignified middle-aged man in his 40s and 50s. He said, "Qi sect, the 3rd generation peak master of Xingyang Peak, Zhang Haiyuan." The second person was handsome and carefree, and his entire body was filled with an extraordinary temperament. He said, "Sword sect, the 3rd generation peak master of Xianyang Peak, Wu Qingfeng." The third person had a tall figure, and the edges and corners of his face were as neat as knives and axes. He said with a strong aura, "Saber sect, Dongyang Peak's 3rd generation peak master, Chu Shaoshan." The fourth person was a woman with a peerless appearance. This woman looked a bit younger than the other peak lords. Her expression was neither salty nor faint. She said indifferently, "Sun Peak, the 4th generation peak lord, Su Kaiyu." Everyone's eyes widened as they stared fixedly at Peak Master Su Kaiyu. To be fair, Su Kaiyu was definitely one of the most beautiful women Xiang Nan had ever seen. In terms of appearance alone, she was not even inferior to the number 1 beauty in the 9 firmaments continent, Xian Qingzhu. Unfortunately, this Su Kaiyu did not dare to laugh. Her face was always filled with a faint aura of rigidity. She was truly somewhat flawed. The 5th person was an old man with a stooped body. This person was untidy and even had bright grease stains on his sleeves. The old man laughed strangely and said, "I am the 3rd generation peak master of Fortune Peak. I am called Half a Gourd." Many disciples were stunned. Half a Gourd? What is this name? However, Xiang Nan's expression was solemn. This half-gourd's origins weren't small. Even in the distant the 9 firmaments continent, the name half-gourd was like thunder piercing through the ears. After the 5 peak masters finished introducing themselves, they all nodded to the left and said, "Old master, let's begin." "Old master." Everyone was shocked and hurriedly looked to the left. On the far left of the 5 peak masters, there was actually an old gentleman with a kind expression. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. When did this old man come? Everyone hadn't noticed the 5 peak masters just now because they weren't paying attention, but just now, everyone was really listening to the peak master speeches. That old gentleman had appeared so inexplicably. No one even knew when he had come. It was as if he had always been there, and it was as if he had never been there. Chapter 115 A Genius Like a Cloud. The old man wrapped his sleeves in his hands and smiled kindly at the crowd. "Welcome to the Nature Sect. Since you have been selected, it means that all of you have extraordinary potential. I won't say anything else. Since you've already come, let me briefly introduce the purpose of our sect. At this point, the old man's expression suddenly became serious, and his soft and kind voice immediately became loud. The reason why my Haran sect is called this name is because of the meaning of Haran, righteous chi. Our sect is different from other sections. Any disciple who joins the Haran sect should adhere to an unwavering purpose, and that is: establish your heart for the heavens and earth, establish your destiny for the people, inherit the supreme art of the holy realm, and create peace for all generations. These few words sounded like a bell, and they were deeply imprinted in the hearts of the disciples. At that moment, all the disciples seemed to have forgotten about their desire to compete and win, and all of them became mindful of the world. Evidently, this sudden change in mentality was not something that the disciples suddenly came to an epiphany. Instead, the old man's voice caused the disciples to rise out of thin air. Xiang Nan's expression was also solemn. This nature sect was truly different from the heavenly profound sect. Throughout the world, all martial arts sects were studying, seeking strength, climbing high and looking far, seeking above 10,000 people below one person. A sect like the Haran sect that upheld the grand Tao and righteousness was very rare. Invisibly, Xiang Nan had some respect for the Haran sect. The old man said, "Our Haran sect never lacks geniuses. What we need is a disciple with a righteous heart. And our sect's commandment is to indiscriminately kill innocent people, chase adultery and kidnapping, chase those who harbor evil intentions, chase brave and bully the weak, chase." If one of the 4 commandments was committed, he would be expelled from the sect and would not be tolerated. The words "chase" exploded in the hearts of the disciples like thunder in the clear sky. All right. Following that, the old man's expression changed and he became amiable again. He smiled and said, "Next, let me introduce the history of my Haran sect." Xiang Nan had already heard about this history from Jiang Yunfan. After that, the 5 peak masters spoke. They simply introduced their own faction characteristics and what benefits they would gain from cultivating after joining their own faction. Xiang Nan, like the other disciples, had apparently inquired about this beforehand. However, what Xiang Nan noticed was that when the other peak masters introduced their factions, they were all extremely arrogant, except for Su Kaiyu, who was as calm as clear water. She simply said, "Anyone who wants to come can come to Sun Peak." Everyone's eyes widened when they heard this, as if Su Kaiyu didn't care if anyone would enter the Sun Peak or not, nor did she have any intention of attracting people's attention. This won't do. Xiang Nan secretly shook his head. He thought to himself, Sun Peak did not have an advantage in the first place. This Su Kaiyu Peak Master was still an unstable practitioner of secular matters. Next was the talent test. The amiable old man brought up a transparent crystal stone. The crystal stone was as tall as a person, and it was in the shape of a multi-sided prism. According to the instructions, the disciples all stepped forward and placed their palms on the Jingshi, releasing their Xiantian or Yuan Qi. Most of these disciples were 16 or 17 years old. Half of them had already entered the origin realm. The strongest of them was actually at the terrifying realm of the second level of origin realm. Earth grade, fire vein. After a disciple stepped forward to test his innate talent, the old man immediately reported his innate talent level and attributes. The level of a martial artist's innate talent was mortal, spirit, earth, heaven, and hidden god. Normally, if one encountered the talent of an earth-grade fire vein, it would definitely cause countless people to be shocked. However, in this Grand Haran sect, no one would exclaim in admiration. Earth grade, water vein. Earth grade, earth vein. Earth grade. As the disciples stepped forward one by one to test, their Earth-grade talent was constantly reported. This unified Earth-grade talent was simply unimaginable, but the expressions of all the disciples were as calm as water. Heavenly grade, fire vein. It wasn't until this sentence was reported that the scene was in an uproar. Not bad, not bad. Even the old man stroked his beard and smiled. Looks like the harvest this year is quite good. That was a heavenly talent, especially a fire attribute. This was already the highest level of talent that could be seen on the market. Even in the peak of the nature sect, this talent made people drool. Many disciples cried out in admiration and admiration. And this person who was reported to be talented in the heavenly grade fire vein was actually a graceful and elegant girl. She looked like she was only 15 or 16 years old, possessing an astonishing second-level origin returning realm. She wore luxurious clothes and exquisite facial features, but she could not hide the arrogance in her bones. Huh, little Lady Sunset has indeed come. Sword Sect Master Wu Qingfeng laughed and said, I've already told your great-grandfather that you have to enter my Xianyang Peak. The scene was in an uproar. Heavens, could she be one of the 5 great families of the East China Sea, Murong Wanqing? The eyes of the disciples glittered. Murong Wanqing smiled sweetly at Peak Master Xiangyang. Wanqing greets Uncle Qingfeng. Wu Qingfeng laughed happily. His carefree manner did not correspond to his status as a supreme being. However, Wu Qingfeng was a person with such a personality. What did you say? The Saber Sect Master, Chu Shaoshan, immediately raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, I've also taken a fancy to little Lady Sunset. She can also join my East Sun Peak. Haha. The Qi sect advocated that Hai Yuan waved his hand. Little girl Wanqing's meridians are very coincidental. Obviously, they are more suitable for our Zhengyang Peak. Little girl, come here to learn how to concoct pills. I guarantee that your youth will last forever and your beauty will last forever. The pill artifact sect master, half a gourd, laughed strangely. Little girl, come here to learn how to concoct pills. A few dignified peak masters began to fight in front of the disciples. Not only was Murong Wanqing extremely talented, her realm was also frighteningly high. It was reasonable for her to be snatched away by the peak masters. In the end, Murong Wanqing bowed to the peak masters and said, Thank you for your favor. However, Wanqing is willing to listen to great-grandpa and join Uncle Qingfeng. Hearing this, Wu Qingfeng laughed heartily, while the other peak masters shook their heads in regret. After the other disciples finished testing their talent, they only waited at the side. Only this Murong Wanqing was decided on the spot. As for Sun Peak's peak master Su Kaiyu, she had actually been resting with her eyes closed, not even glancing at Murong Wanqing. This made Murong Wanqing, who was arrogant, feel a little embarrassed. Perhaps this woman was too proud and too strong. She had already chosen Xiang Yangfeng, but she actually bowed to the Sun Peak Master on the spot and said, May I ask Lord Peak Master, is Sunset Sun so untalented that she is unable to enter the eyes of the Sect Master? Why does the Sect Master not even look at Sunset? The other disciples kept praising these words, but Xiang Nan frowned slightly, thinking to himself that this little girl seemed to have been spoiled. Unexpectedly, Su Kaiyu raised her eyelids slightly and said, Who is Sunset? Sunset. Who is it? Murong Wanqing, who was naturally proud of herself, was stunned like a thunderbolt from the blue. A trace of anger flashed across her expression. Chapter 116 Have no intention of provoking. Murong Wanqing's anger was captured by Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan thought to himself. It seemed that this woman was spoiled and raised. she would actually get angry because of such a trivial matter. However, Muron Wanqing was not stupid. No matter how arrogant she was, she did not dare to show any disrespect to a dignified peak master. She only smiled brightly and stopped talking. Next, the test continued. Heavenly grade, fire vein. Another disciple was reported to have such a shocking talent. This person was a 16 or 17-year-old man, also at the second level of origin return. Lin Hai. Saber sect Chu Shaoshan immediately said, "Your grandfather and I are good friends. You must enter my East Sun Peak." Ah, it's the Shen clan, one of the 5 great clans of the East China Sea. Shen Lin Hai. The disciples whispered, their faces filled with envy. These disciples came a lot earlier than Xiang Nan, and they seemed to know the situation in Donghai province like the back of their hand. The so-called aristocratic families were very different from clans. If you have money, you can network your relatives together and form a family. However, aristocratic families needed at least 10 generations of inheritance to survive in order to be worthy of the title of aristocratic family, such as the Whampoa aristocratic family. There are 5 large aristocratic families in Donghai province: Muron clan, Shen clan, Feng clan, Jiang clan, and Luo clan. These 5 aristocratic families could be counted in the entire the Hautian Empire. Each of them was a resounding colossus. Moreover, according to what was happening, the relationship between the 5 aristocratic families and the Haran sect was quite close. Thinking about it, it was much easier for them to enter the Haran sect than for a poor kid like Xiang Nan, who had no money or power. Not surprisingly, Shen Linhai entered the Saber sect. Soon after, Feng Zhaoqi of the Feng clan, Luo Yuan of the Luo clan, and Jiang Yu of the Jiang clan were all chosen on the spot with their heavenly talent. These 5 young disciples from the 5 great families were all gifted with heavenly grade talent. The youngest was only 16 years old, and the oldest was only 17 years old. They were also at the first level of origin returning realm. The youngest was only 16 years old, and the oldest was only 17 years old. The atmosphere at the scene became lively. From their conversations, it could be seen that this was truly a bumper harvest year for the Haran sect. All the people from the 5 great clans had arrived. Apart from these 5 brilliant geniuses, the other geniuses were a bit ordinary. Most of them were earth-grade geniuses. Occasionally, disciples with heaven-grade geniuses were either slightly older or had lower cultivation bases. None of them could compare to the 5 sedans. In the end, it was Xiang Nan's turn. Xiang Nan really had the courage to test his talent, but now that the matter had reached this point, there was no way he could escape. When Xiang Nan stepped forward, something strange happened. Su Kaiyu, the heavenly young peak master who had been resting with her eyes closed, actually opened her eyes in a rare manner. Xiang Nan's heart sank. No matter how talented others were, Su Kaiyu didn't even look at them. Why did she open her eyes when she was here? Could it be related to the sun god technique? Could Su Kaiyu be able to sense the lightning attribute that was similar to light? Many disciples immediately cried out in surprise. One of them pointed at Xiang Nan and said, "May I ask which family does this junior brother come from?" One of the disciples asked this question because of Su Caiyue's unusual performance, and the other was because of Xiang Nan's shabby attire. Those who could come to the Haran sect were all descendants of aristocratic families, and at the very least, they were also nobles. Their attire was extremely exquisite, and even a seemingly ordinary bracelet ornament in their hands was worth a lot of money. Looking at Xiang Nan, although his clothes weren't really tattered, they were at most better than ordinary people, but in the eyes of many noble children, he could definitely go beg for food with a broken bowl. Xiang Nan didn't care about the looks in everyone's eyes. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "I'm from the lower Wulong continent, Blackstone City, Xiang Nan." Everyone was dumbfounded, and then they all laughed out loud. Murong Wanqing was even more concerned about Xiang Nan and said, "Wulong continent? I didn't expect that kind of desolate country to produce talents. Junior brother Xiang Nan, come, I'll give you 100,000 gold coins and find time to buy 2 sets of clothes." Everyone laughed again. Murong Wanqing seemed to care about her senior brothers, but in reality, she was just mocking him. Especially when she took out a sparkling gold coin storage card in front of everyone and handed it over. However, she only handed it over, but did not step forward. How could Xiang Nan shamelessly go up to receive it? He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, junior sister, for your kindness, but you won't receive any rewards if you don't have any merits. You should take it back." He knew that Murong Wanqing wasn't targeting him, but because Peak Master Su Kaiyu didn't look at her, but looked at him instead. Therefore, she, Murong Wanqing, was actually mocking Su Kaiyu for her lack of vision by mocking him. Xiang Nan was too lazy to get involved in this muddy water. He neither took the money nor retorted. "And, that's good. Perhaps you're used to wearing this kind of clothes, but you might not feel comfortable wearing anything else." Unexpectedly, Murong Wanqing was so aggressive that she added this sentence. Even though Xiang Nan was a little angry, he ignored Murong Wanqing and directly walked up to put his palm on a crystal as tall as a person. It was good to directly curse people. The most annoying thing was the kind of guy who pretended to be kind but actually sarcastically mocked others. Xiang Nan was a little worried after putting the crystal stones on, and Su Caiyue's pair of beautiful eyes also focused on the crystal stones. This scene made Murong Wanqing even more unhappy. She definitely wouldn't join Sun Peak, but she couldn't accept the fact that Sun Peak's Peak Master ignored her. At this moment, the crystal flashed. Heavenly grade, no attributes. The old man stood at the side and reported Xiang Nan's talent with a smile. Some of the disciples laughed, while others remained indifferent. Heavenly grade did not have any attributes. It was neither good nor bad. Its grade was quite high, but its lack of attributes had become a chicken rib. Xiang Nan felt strange in his heart. It seemed that the crystal stone could only detect heavenly talent at the highest, but it could not detect divine quality. As for why the lightning meridian's attribute could not be detected, it was possible that the divine rank talent was too high, suppressing the ability of the crystal stone to detect. However, it was good that such an outcome was in line with Xiang Nan's wishes. Next, everyone chose their own factions. Some went to the Qi sect, some went to the Sword sect and Saber sect. Only 3 people went to the Fortune Peak. Only Xiang Nan made a decision that caused everyone's eyes to drop. He actually went to the Sun Peak. Standing beside Su Kaiyu. This brat, everyone found it hard to believe. Who doesn't know the origin of Sun Peak? Going to Sun Peak was equivalent to destroying one's future. Xiang Nan had his own plans. There were very few disciples on the Sun Peak, so it was just right for him to protect his innate secret. As for whether or not the Sun God's skill could really kill people, Xiang Nan didn't care. He had a powerful 9 transformations thunder-shocking skill. Originally, although Xiang Nan's actions were strange, they didn't have any other meaning. However, in the eyes of others, there was something else. Murong Wanqing's face turned green and red, but she still maintained a smile. She tilted her head at Xiang Nan and said, "Junior brother Xiang Nan, are you showing me your face? Just because Su Kaiyu ignored me, Moron Wanqing, you actually want to join Sun Peak? This isn't for me, Moron Wanqing, what is it? Was it because I gave you the money just now that you made a fool of yourself? On the side, Shen Linhai, Luo Yuan, and Feng Zhaoqi all hugged their shoulders and laughed with interest. Chapter 117 Sun God Technique. The world of martial arts has always been like this. Even if you don't intend to provoke it, there are many things that you can't avoid. Even ordinary people would cause conflicts because of their family background, not to mention the fiery martial artists. Xiang Nan knew that there was no way to explain this matter. The more he explained, the more chaotic it became. He simply said to Moron Wanqing, "You think too much." Moron Wanqing took a deep look at Xiang Nan and didn't say anything else. However, Xiang Nan knew that this small beam was formed. Even Moron Wanqing dared to bear grudges against Peak Master Su Kaiyu, let alone a poor boy like himself in the remote countryside. In short, try not to interact with Moron Wanqing in the future. I am here to study, not to fight with others. After the sects were divided, there was a greeting ceremony. The disciples present officially became the 23rd generation disciples of the Haran sect, and their nominal master was their respective peak master. Afterwards, the disciples followed their own masters back to their own side peaks. The other peak masters waved their hands and brought their new disciples back to Pianfeng with their yuan qi. Su Kaiyu was the only one who flew away, ignoring Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan rubbed his nose and could only walk away with a bitter smile. Fortunately, there were arch bridges built between the various peaks, so there was no need to go down the mountain again. They directly crossed the intricate arch bridges and arrived at Sun Peak. Although this Sun Peak's name was quite bluffing, it was actually the most partial peak. Amidst the mist, the Sun Palace of Sun Peak came into view. It was a quiet building made of desolate bamboo wood. Its architectural style was very light and unique. It was not as spectacular as a palace, and it had a different charm. The special quality of the desolate bamboo wood was faint yellow and faint golden under the gradually slanting sunlight, and it was worthy of the word Sun Palace. Strangely enough, when Xiang Nan passed through the other side peaks were filled with flourishing incense. A large number of disciples were laughing and joking, and they were getting to know their new fellow disciples. There wasn't even a single person on the Sun Peak. At the main entrance of Sun Palace, Su Kaiyu stood alone. Xiang Nan was stunned, thinking that senior brother Yun Fan had lied to me. How could Sun Peak be a sparrow? It was simply a desolate place. Do you regret it? Su Kaiyu put her hands behind her back and quietly looked at Xiang Nan. If you regret it, you can leave. Go talk to the other peak masters. They will still take you in. Xiang Nan asked, Master, how many disciples are there in Sun Palace? Su Kaiyu said, there were some before, but most of them left after joining Sun Palace for a few days. Currently, you are the only disciple. I'm the only one. Although Xiang Nan was mentally prepared, he didn't expect the result to be so shocking. The Grand Haran sect actually had a faction with only one disciple. Looks like the Sun God Technique's reputation is really great. Quit? Su Kaiyu asked. Xiang Nan shook his head. Since this disciple chose Sun Peak, then he must. Su Kaiyu did not wait for Xiang Nan to talk about it. Instead, she directly tossed a book to Xiang Nan and said, this is the Haotian Chun Yuan technique. Go and learn it yourself. Also, don't come looking for me if you're in trouble. I can't handle the big trouble, but I'm too lazy to care about the small trouble. After saying that, Su Kaiyu turned around and entered the Sun Palace without looking at Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan bitterly smiled as he caught the cultivation technique book and sighed, "What a master with a bright personality. It seems that I will have some peace in the future." After saying that, Xiang Nan also stepped into the hall. The facilities in Sun Palace were complete, and there were large areas of elegant courtyards for disciples to live in. Of course, they were all empty. There were also green bamboo swaying along with the night wind. It was unknown who had the powerful ability to forcefully lead the spring water to the peak of the mountain. A clear spring fell from the sky and sprinkled on the cliff, creating a sparkling mist of water. Under the bright moonlight, Xiang Nan sat alone beside a quiet pond and flipped through the Haotian Chun Yuan technique. To be exact, this was not a battle technique. Instead, it was a cultivation technique. Using it to breathe in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth could increase one's martial arts realm and at the same time possess a powerful self-repairing ability. This technique had once been used by Jiang Yunfan to cure Xiang Nan, leaving a deep impression on him. But it's a skillful job. After Xiang Nan finished reading the Haotian Chun Yuan technique, he nodded in satisfaction. He immediately closed his eyes and began to circulate his heart technique oral arts. Gradually, a pure elemental energy was bred in Xiang Nan's body. In addition, the spiritual energy here was several hundred times more powerful than the outside world. This allowed Xiang Nan's martial arts realm to make a great leap forward in a short period of time. Xiang Nan was speechless all night, cultivating alone, and for the next 3 consecutive days, it was the same. On the 4th night, Xiang Nan finally stepped into the half-step origin return realm and stopped. If he continued, he would no longer be able to advance through cultivation. He would have to convert the weather into Yuan Qi. If he cultivated this step himself, it would probably take him a year and a half, so he had to borrow the essence transformation pill. But, how can I obtain the essence transformation pill? Xiang Nan frowned and finally stood up to stretch his muscles and bones. He went to ask his master. The night is not too late, so I guess master hasn't fallen asleep yet. Only after leaving did Xiang Nan feel that his gait was light and comfortable. The Haotian Chun Yuan technique was indeed very effective, and even the weather inside his body had become much more lively. But, where does master live? Xiang Nan rubbed his nose and could only search for the huge Sun Palace buildings one after another. Only when he found a strange palace entrance did he discover traces of Su Kaiyu. The scene before Xiang Nan's eyes shocked him. This was a huge dome with a diameter of 100 meters, but the dome was not sealed. There was a 50-meter diameter opening that allowed one to directly see the stars in the night sky. Su Kaiyu was sitting right below the patio, and her body was illuminated by a beam of bright sunlight. Xiang Nan was shocked. That light was definitely daylight. But this night, where did the sun come from? Immediately after, Su Kaiyu seemed as if she did not notice Xiang Nan's existence at all. She still closed her eyes, then raised her left hand to the dantian, raised her right hand high, and raised her palm to the sky. Following that, a thick beam of sunlight 10 meters in diameter descended from the sky and landed on Su Caiyue's body with a loud boom. The daylight was dazzling, giving people the feeling of looking straight at the sun. The moment the sun smashed down, the ground shook violently, causing Xiang Nan to bounce more than half a foot high. The intense and dazzling sunlight completely enveloped Su Kaiyu. Behind Su Kaiyu, an incomparably large, phantom sun slowly appeared. Xiang Nan sucked in a breath of cold air and took 2 or 3 steps back, his eyeballs almost flying out. What heaven-defying cultivation technique was this? With Xiang Nan's gaze at this moment, Su Kaiyu sat with her eyes closed. Under the intense light, her jet-black hair turned into golden threads. Her entire body was shrouded in sunlight, as if she was a god of the sun descending from the sky. At that moment, in front of the sun, the darkness dissipated. Demons and evil spirits did not invade, and the heavens and earth were like daylight. You're really right. Xiang Nan bit his lips hard to wake himself up, and at the same time, he was overjoyed. This was the sun god technique. My God, such a terrifying cultivation technique is simply incomprehensible. Chapter 118 Night Talk between Master and Disciple. Xiang Nan was excited and couldn't wait to learn the sun god technique, because the sun god technique itself was the technique of the sun peak. However, no matter how excited he was, he forced himself to suppress it. He just sat quietly on the ground and did not disturb his master's cultivation. Looking at the beam of light that landed on Su Caiyue's body, it gradually began to weaken, as if she had already entered the stage of retracting her cultivation. About half an hour later, Su Caiyue finally retracted her hands and the light in the sky completely disappeared. Su Caiyue opened her eyes and looked at Xiang Nan without saying anything. She knew that Xiang Nan had something to say. Master, is this the sun god technique? Yes. Can you impart it to me? No. Su Caiyue was still as rigid as ever, and she could speak as little as possible. Why? Xiang Nan hurriedly said, I am your only descendant at present. Why can't you teach me the sun god technique? Su Caiyue said, because if you learn the sun god technique, you will die. It wasn't until Su Caiyue said those words that Xiang Nan caught the change of emotions on her face for the first time. It was an undetectable sadness that flashed through his eyes. Xiang Nan knew about the origin of the sun god technique. Perhaps the sadness in Su Caiyue's eyes was reminiscing about her dead father. Or perhaps he was sad that his father had personally created a peerless technique of the sun god technique, and that there was no successor. Of course, she wanted to carry forward the sun god technique, but for the sake of other people's lives, she could only say this. This was a kind of contradictory sorrow. I'm not afraid. Xiang Nan refused to give up. Su Caiyue shook her head, it's useless to be brave. Xiang Nan was a little anxious, and said, what on earth are you going to teach me? Su Caiyue remained silent and did not know what she was thinking. After a full 5 minutes, she said, the sun god technique is incomparably complicated. It is not something that can be learned if you want to learn it. Before that, let me ask you a few questions. If your answer satisfies me, I will consider imparting it to you. Master, tell me. Su Caiyue said, as far as you can see, do you think Sun Shan technique is feasible and why? This question was very vague, because Xiang Nan had never learned it at all. If it was someone else, there was no way to answer it, but Xiang Nan already had an idea in his heart. After thinking for a long time, Xiang Nan said seriously, I think the sun god technique is feasible. Although we human martial artists absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, demonic beasts can absorb the essence of stars and moons. Oh. Su Caiyue raised her eyebrows and said, go on. Xiang Nan knew that he had found the right direction and said, however, the difficulty is that demonic beasts are stronger than humans. Unfortunately, just because they absorb the essence of stars and moons does not mean that humans can do it. Especially the essence of stars and moons. It's not as intense as the sun's rays. Therefore, it's more difficult for humans to absorb the sun's rays. However, it's not completely impossible. Su Caiyue nodded, her eyes filled with approval. Then why do you think the sun's rays can be absorbed and utilized by humans like spirit energy? Xiang Nan said, The sun shines on the earth, nourishing all living things to grow, and all living things give birth to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, nearly half of the source of spiritual energy comes from sunlight. Therefore, although it is very difficult, it is feasible. At this time, Su Tsayue's face was slightly surprised. She began to look at Xiang Nan again and said, "I didn't expect you to know so much at such a young age." Xiang Nan said modestly, "I'm only talking about logical speculation. I don't need a huge reserve of knowledge. If I were to create a sun divine art myself, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens." Su Kaiyu nodded and said, "Don't be arrogant or impatient. Then what do you think? How do you think you can overcome the difficulty of cultivating the sun god technique?" Xiang Nan thought for a moment and said, "If you want to skip the middle link of spiritual energy and directly absorb sunlight, it will cause tremendous impact on the body's meridians and even irreparable permanent injuries. Perhaps we can follow the example of demonic beasts and increase the strength of our meridians and bodies to resist the impact of sunlight." Absorbing sunlight was a completely different concept from ordinary people being exposed to sunlight. It was just like the difference between roasting fire and swallowing fire. Although the metaphor was not accurate enough, it was roughly the same. Su Kaiyu said expressionlessly, "This idea is fine, so do you think cultivating the sun god technique requires body refinement?" Xiang Nan originally wanted to answer in the affirmative, but he frowned. Suddenly, he thought of something and hurriedly said, "No. Just strengthening your body is like building a dam to block water, but it's better to block water than to block it." At this point, Xiang Nan slapped his thigh and his eyes lit up. "Plants. We can imitate the way plants absorb sunlight." Su Kaiyu smiled. Xiang Nan was dumbfounded. It turned out that she smiled so beautifully, but thinking that she was her master after all, Xiang Nan quickly straightened his attitude and didn't dare to be disrespectful. Su Kaiyu said, "My father also thought of this point, but, after all, a person is a human. It is easy to say that he is similar to a plant, but how difficult is it to do it? But the meridians in the human body are actually very similar to the meridians in plants, aren't they?" Xiang Nan said. Su Kaiyu said, "However, plants absorb sunlight most instinctively, while humans use their meridians to circulate spiritual energy or sunlight. It belongs to the outside world." At first, Su Kaiyu only asked Xiang Nan questions, but as Xiang Nan answered, the two of them gradually changed from asking and answering questions to communicating and conversing with each other. If the elders of the Haran sect saw this scene, they would lose their eyes. Everyone knew that Su Kaiyu was silent. If they wanted to talk to her, it would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. Thus, Xiang Nan and Su Kaiyu slowly began to talk about the accommodation between humans and plants. At this moment, the two of them no longer seemed to be in the relationship of master and disciple, but more like bosom friends and confidants. Su Kaiyu, who had always been rigid, would be interested in the cultivation method her father had created and would forget about her lofty status. When it came to rising, the two of them couldn't help but have red faces, or they couldn't help but frown. The difficulty of the sun god technique was very great. Although it could be cultivated, the longer it cultivated, the more serious the physical injuries to humans would become. If this problem was not solved, then cultivating this technique would truly be tantamount to committing chronic suicide. Others learn martial arts for the sake of longevity. Who would be willing to learn a martial art that ends in death? Xiang Nan had no choice but to admit that Su Tsayue's knowledge really made him look at her differently. The two talked from midnight to midnight, and then from midnight to late night. Xiang Nan licked his lips and said somewhat unhappily, it would be most beautiful if there was a pot of good wine accompanying us. Su Kaiyu smiled faintly. With a wave of her hand, a wine jar flew out of her storage ring. The shape of the wine jar was simple and simple. It was an antique at a glance. Xiang Nan's greedy insect was hooked up, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. He poured a gentle cup for his master and a bowl for himself. He drank a few large mouthfuls of it, and the burning fragrance of the wine soaked into his heart and spleen. He couldn't help but shout for joy. Compared to the bold and unrestrained Xiang Nan, Su Kaiyu gently pecked at the wine and tasted its fragrance. Chapter 119 Class C Class 10. So, cultivating the sun god technique is actually the most suitable for cultivating wood veins? Xiang Nan muttered, if I'm not mistaken, Master, your talent should be heavenly grade wood veins, right? Su Kaiyu smiled and nodded, heavenly grade wood and fire veins. Xiang Nan was speechless. The heavenly grade wood and fire dual meridians could also be called the heavenly spirit dual meridians. This was already considered very rare in the martial world. Su Kaiyu said, however, although the wood vein is good, the lightning meridians is even better. When I first saw you at Haran Peak a few days ago, I thought you were a lightning meridians, but I didn't expect you to lack the affinity of the 5 elements. Xiang Nan suddenly realized that when Master looked at him, did she feel a trace of lightning pulse in his body? Su Kaiyu and her daughter had spent their entire lives studying the sun god technique, so they had an extraordinary sense of smell towards thunder meridians. What a pity! Su Kaiyu shook her head. She had already begun to admire this brat Xiang Nan. Unfortunately, Xiang Nan's talent wasn't good enough. At this time, Xiang Nan gave Su Kaiyu a bright smile, Master, I am actually a heavenly grade lightning meridians. Xiang Nan was able to say these words, but no one else could understand the hardships. The reason why Xiang Nan died in his previous life was because he was too talented. In this life, he still chose to trust his master and report the attributes of his lightning meridians, only concealing the heaven-defying grade of divine grade. Xiang Nan did not want to be a martial artist who would rather let himself take down the world than let the world take down him. He was still willing to welcome his life with enthusiasm. At the same time, he was more willing to believe in Su Kaiyu, the woman who upheld his father's last wish to protect Sun Peak alone. Su Tsayue's eyes lit up and she said, let's see. Xiang Nan spread out his right hand and transformed his qi into lightning. A small ball of lightning appeared in his palm. As expected. While Su Kaiyu was excited, she did not ask why Xiang Nan's talent had not been detected, and she did not care. Su Tsayue's expression was brilliant as she said, lightning veins are more suitable for sun god techniques than wood veins. However, this is still far from enough. Innate talent alone is not enough. We must strengthen our body. However, if you want to solve this problem overnight, it's unrealistic. It's better for you to upgrade to the origin realm as soon as possible. Only by possessing Yuan Qi can you cultivate the sun god technique. At this moment, the sky had already brightened, and the two of them talked overnight, and they felt like they wanted to see each other too late. Speaking of which, Xiang Nan suddenly remembered his purpose and hurriedly said, how should I obtain the pills of our Haran sect? He was here to find a way to obtain the essence transformation pill. He almost forgot about it and cursed in his heart that his brain was not working well. Su Kaiyu said, in order to obtain pills, you must enter the Haran Academy. After your basic martial arts theory is approved by your mentor, you can go to the credit hall to receive missions. You can exchange the credits you earn for pills, weapons, martial skill manuals, and so on. Ah! Then when can the Haran Academy enter? Xiang Nan was shocked. It turned out that he wanted to exchange credits for medicinal pills, so did the formula he wanted for the resistance to electricity. Su Kaiyu said, on the second day after the distribution of the factions, I have to enter the academy to register. Ah! Xiang Nan's eyes widened. This is going to register the next day. Then I'm already 5 days late. Why didn't anyone tell me? Su Kaiyu indifferently took away the wine jar and said, because I forgot. Is that what you're saying? Xiang Nan scrambled to wash up by the pond, took out a chicken leg from his storage ring, and ran down the mountain while eating. Looking at Xiang Nan's departing figure, Su Kaiyu nodded silently. Father, I accepted the right person this time. Haran Academy was located below the 6 peaks. It was divided into 6 grades, with the lowest grade and the highest grade. The 7th generation elders of the Haran sect were the mentors. After a student officially graduated from a 6th grade institution, he would be promoted to a 7th generation elder. This was also the current generation elder seat with the lowest seniority in the Haran sect. Each grade school was divided into different classes according to the number of students. Currently, there were a total of Class A10, Class B10, and Class C10 in the first grade academy. Each class was filled with 100 people, and there were a total of 3,000 students in 30 classes. Since then, the 23rd generation of disciples had no longer been recruited. Xiang Nan belonged to the 3rd batch of 23rd generation disciples, which meant that there were 2 batches of seniors above him. The earliest batch had arrived a year earlier than Xiang Nan. On the other hand, Xiang Nan's non-attributed talent was neither low nor high. In terms of actual combat, it was actually comparable to the attributed talent of Earth grade. Logically speaking, he should enter Class B. However, because Xiang Nan's cultivation level was too low, he was assigned to Class C, plus he was 5 days late, so he was fined to Class C, which was the bottom class. After hearing this news, Xiang Nan's face turned green, but what could he do? He couldn't blame his master. When Xiang Nan arrived at his class, he discovered that the class hall was actually a huge training ground. All the students were sitting on the ground. A young 7th generation elder was explaining basic theories to the students on a scroll that depicted the meridians of the human body. As soon as Xiang Nan arrived, 100 pairs of eyes stared at him alone. Holy shit! This is the kid who's 5 days late. It must be him. He really has a personality. He actually doesn't put the 7th generation elders in his eyes. If he doesn't say so, then he won't come. Ah, I remember this brat. He is the only disciple of the Sun Peak. Xiang Nan felt extremely embarrassed when he was stared at by 99 students and an elder. These youths were called 23 generations of disciples in the Haran sect, and were collectively called students in the Haran Academy. The 7th generation elder mentor looked coldly at Xiang Nan and said, Xiang Nan, what a grand person. I've heard of you a long time ago, but wanting to see you is so difficult. Xiang Nan smiled bitterly, not knowing how to answer. When the mentor saw that Xiang Nan did not answer, he was even angrier. Do you treat this place like an inn? Come and go if you want. If you can't satisfy me today, don't dream of stepping into this threshold. Xiang Nan's heart went cold. If he didn't let his mentor nod, he wouldn't have the qualifications to go to the credit hall to receive missions. When the mentor was angry with Xiang Nan, he also angered the other students and said angrily, if I had known that Class C Class 10 was a bunch of useless rotten wood. You guys actually didn't advance so much. Everyone was enraged and glared at Xiang Nan with pairs of angry eyes. Xiang Nan had a guilty look on his face, and he didn't know how to make up for it. The mentor continued angrily, "This lesson is about the relationship between spiritual energy and meridians. I learned all of them on the first day of Class A, and I also finished learning all of them on the second day of Class B. In the end, you Class C Class 10 students actually didn't understand after 5 days. These martial artist youths were just like ordinary martial artists. They only cared about practicing martial arts, so how could they waste time to learn martial arts theories? Normally speaking, although the knowledge of martial arts theory was vast and profound, it was of little help to actual combat. The reason for learning this was because only by learning martial arts theory would it be possible to create martial arts techniques in the future. Therefore, this kind of course relied solely on one's perception. Chapter 120 Inexplicable. The more he spoke, the angrier the mentor became. He spat Xingzi flying around and said, "Do you think our Haran sect only relied on 2 fists? If a martial artist only knows how to fight, he will at most become an expert of a generation. Only by knowing how to create martial techniques and martial skills, and being able to set up a sect, can he become a grandmaster of a generation." Many students hurriedly nodded in agreement. This mentor didn't like Class C Class 10 very much. Back then, he was one of the top students. If not for this, how could he graduate from a 6th grade institution and become a 7th generation elder? The more outstanding a student like him was, the less he liked inferior students. That was why he was so angry. The instructor pointed at Xiang Nan angrily and shouted, "Don't think that just because you can enter the Haran sect, you don't care about martial arts theory. Do you really think that my class is just a mess? Let me ask you. What is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth?" Xiang Nan said, "Everything in the world has its own spirit. Mountains, rivers, and rivers can give birth to the spirit of the earth. They are divided into earth veins, spirit veins, death veins, dragon veins, spirit veins that give birth to vegetation, spirit veins that give birth to ores. Life also has a spirit. The spirit of life gives birth to all living beings. It is divided into." Xiang Nan spoke at length and confidently. This knowledge was his specialty, causing many students to be stunned. "Ha!" After Xiang Nan finished speaking, the mentor was stunned for a moment. He wanted to make things difficult for Xiang Nan, but who would have thought that Xiang Nan would really answer? Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief. He thought to himself that he could enter this time. Unexpectedly, the mentor's eyebrows twitched and he said, "What is innate affinity?" Xiang Nan said calmly, "Because of the differences in the meridians of martial artists, they are divided into 5 major categories, and all things in the world are composed of 5 elements. Those who are sensitive to wind elements are wind meridians, while those who are sensitive to earth elements are earth meridians. The branches of the wind meridian structure are single and thick, moving smoothly and straight. The fire meridian structure is thick and multi-branched. At first, the movement is complicated, but the other end is wide, so it is good at erupting." A set of theoretical knowledge about innate affinity was gushed out by Xiang Nan endlessly. "Ah!" The mentor actually took half a step back and looked at Xiang Nan in shock. Xiang Nan's set of answers was practically perfect. Then, the mentor took a deep breath and said, "Then tell me how your meridians absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and how they are refined through your dantian." Xiang Nan said, "The spiritual energy of heaven and earth flows into the meridians like water into the roots of trees. It's..." After saying that, the instructor blushed and felt extremely embarrassed. He then said, "What kind of principle does that martial artist use to summon Yuan Qi?" Xiang Nan said, "Teacher, this question is already within the scope of the Heavenly Inspiration Response chapter. Only then did the mentor realize that he had lost his composure and could only let Xiang Nan in reluctantly. The joy in the hearts of all the students present all gave Xiang Nan a respectful glance and secretly gave him a thumbs up. They viciously let out a mouthful of anger in their hearts. These past few days, these so-called inferior students of theirs had been mocked and ridiculed by this mentor. The first class exam was on the 7th day of entrance. As long as Xiang Nan passed the exam 2 days later, he could go to the credit hall to accept the mission. After the class ended, the instructor left angrily. Many students immediately surrounded Xiang Nan and asked around. "Xiang Nan, you don't know that we've been so angry these past few days that we've been wronged to death." "That's right. Fortunately, you know more than us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to find a hole in the ground with him," sarcastically. "Speaking of which, why do you know so much theoretical knowledge? Could it be that you have been learning these boring things since you were young?" Just as everyone was talking, someone outside the classroom suddenly shouted, "Xiang Nan, someone is looking for you." "Looking for me?" Xiang Nan walked towards the door strangely. He thought to himself, "I don't know anyone here. Who would look for me?" When they arrived at the door, they discovered that there were 3 people standing outside. They were about the same age as Xiang Nan. The 2 people in front of them were normal height, but the one behind them was 2.2 meters away. All the muscles in his body were taut and sturdy. At the front, a gentle-looking young man smiled at Xiang Nan and said, "Are you Xiang Nan?" Xiang Nan felt that the 3 of them were very unfamiliar. It was as if this was the first time he saw them. He subconsciously nodded and said, "I am, you." Just as Xiang Nan's words were spoken, the 2-meter-tall man across from him stepped forward and smashed his fist towards Xiang Nan's face. Xiang Nan didn't even have the slightest bit of precaution against this punch. It was definitely too late to retreat. He hurriedly used both of his hands to protect his face. The strong man's heavy punch smashed into Xiang Nan's palm, causing him to slide backwards 3 to 5 meters. The strength of this punch was astonishing. After Xiang Nan put down his hands, his wrists trembled slightly. "I don't know where I offended you." Xiang Nan frowned. Xiang Nan knew very well that his purpose in coming to the nature sect was not to fight with others, so he decided that it was better to do one more thing than one less thing. Those that can be dissolved, try to dissolve them in a friendly manner, but those that cannot, think of another way. "How can I offend you?" The burly man rubbed his fists and stepped through the door. He looked down at Xiang Nan condescendingly and asked if he were Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan frowned even deeper. "I said before, I am Xiang Nan." "Since you are, then that's right." The sturdy man strode over 2 meters and swung his thick arm with another punch. This punch was even heavier than the previous one. It was actually accompanied by the whistling sound of the wind. Xiang Nan was prepared this time. He immediately pushed his hands up, pushed them on the strong man's wrist, and borrowed the strength to backflip. The sturdy man's left leg also followed him and crossed another 2 meters. His left hand, the size of an alms bowl, grabbed Xiang Nan's collar and then raised his left leg. His long leg swept towards Xiang Nan's lower body with a strong wind. Xiang Nan bent his knees clashing against the strong man's sweeping legs, and he borrowed strength to turn back again. The sturdy man's leg smashed into the wall, causing cracks to appear one after another. In this kind of place, everyone tacitly agreed not to use the primordial weather and yuan qi. Otherwise, destroying the academy would not be an offense. Since that was the case, the strong man who had the advantage of the Xiantian body had the upper hand. The other students of class 10 also reacted and hurriedly rushed forward. "Why are you hitting people?" The students of class 10 were all indignant. Perhaps because they were all inferior students, they were assigned to the worst class C, class 10, and they actually had a kind of unity power. The sturdy man tilted his head and swept his fierce gaze across the crowd, causing the students to take a few steps back in fright. This sturdy man's enormous body had a natural oppressive force, especially his extremely strong strength, causing the students to be very fearful. The students of the 10th class were the weakest among the 23rd generation disciples. "Li Hu, it's almost time. Let's leave first." The gentle-looking young man at the door laughed, and then the two of them turned around and left. The burly man nodded and walked out of the door. When he reached the door, he turned around and pointed at Xiang Nan's nose, saying, "You'd better be honest with me." After saying that, the three of them walked away one after another. Xiang Nan was angry, but he was really confused. He did not know who those three people were, nor did he know why they came to find trouble for him. Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle.